Chapter 1067. From a moment the Akatsuki organization attacked the daimyos, many of the 5 great shinobi villages were aware of the Akatsuki organization's motive. So since then, Mai has been trying to contact Amatsukami. In everyone's opinion, only the leader of Amatsukami, Yama, can match the leader of the Akatsuki organization, Nagato. As for the other ninjas, even the Kage of the 5 great shinobi villages, who once stood at the peak of the shinobi world, can't resist Nagato, who has the Rinnegan. Therefore, whether or not Amatsukami can support Mai is the key to whether or not he can resist the Akatsuki organization's attack. Seeing Itachi, who was disguised as Hyojin, shook his head, the elder's expression became solemn. Everyone in the room is very clear that without the support of Amatsukami, it will be very difficult for the 5 great shinobi villages to resist the Akatsuki organization's attack. At this time, an Umbu rushed into Naruto's office and reported, 3 generations, 5 generations, elders, the intelligence team has confirmed that the information sent back by the patrol team is true. And Tsunade immediately said, "Don't hesitate." The Umbu could only bite the bullet and said, "And the actual situation is even worse than what the patrol team reported." After learning the information sent back by the patrol team, Kaiichi Yamanaka immediately used the mind reversal technique to control a communication eagle to fly to the scene of the incident and confirm with his own eyes that the information sent back by the patrol team is true. Not only that, he also found that the information sent back by the patrol team is not only not exaggerated, but also incomplete. The cloud of detonation talismans that is coming toward my village is not just a single cloud, but a whole cloud that covers the sky and covers the earth. The scope and scale of the explosion is so large that if he didn't see it with his own eyes, he wouldn't be able to imagine it. 3 generations murmured, "Is the Akatsuki organization going to launch a decisive battle?" Zhuan Shaochun, Jiraiya, and Tsunade were also worried. At first, they thought that the information sent back by the patrol team was exaggerated, but now they found out that it is exactly the opposite. Everyone shuddered at the thought of a huge cloud of detonation talismans approaching the village. Itachi, who was disguised as Hyojin, made a prompt decision and suggested, "Arrange for the villagers to be relocated." The 3 generations pondered for a moment and nodded. "Yes, this time, regardless of whether the Akatsuki wants to fight with us or not, we will treat it as a final battle." The advisory elders nodded in unison, agreeing with Itachi's proposal and the policy of 3 generations. Then 3 generations looked at Itachi. Itachi said consciously, "You have more experience than me, so you should be the one to deploy." Time is pressing, and the 3 generations didn't delay and immediately began to deploy. Kuroto, the village has already assembled the ninja army. Now you have full authority to command. Tsunade, you are in charge of evacuating the villagers. Shaochun, go and inform the other Kage that the war is coming. Itachi, Tsunade, and Zhuan Shaochun nodded one after another and left Naruto's office. After the others left, Jiraiya asked, "Sensei, what about me?" The Akatsuki's target is Naruto and Fu. After a pause, 3 generations looked at Jiraiya and said, "From now on, their safety is in your hands." Jiraiya nodded heavily. "I understand." 3 generations Naruto stopped Jiraiya, who was about to leave. "Don't worry, before that, I need you to do something else." Jiraiya looked at 3 generations in confusion. Walking to the window, 3 generations looked at the bustling street outside and said, "It will take a lot of time to evacuate the villagers, so we must think of a way to delay the Akatsuki's attack." Frowning, Jiraiya thought of something. "Sensei, you want to carry out the plan proposed by Kakashi?" 3 generations nodded lightly. "Yes." Jiraiya was a little hesitant, but Amatsuki, 3 generations said, "Don't worry, if Amatsuki wants to pursue the matter, this old man will bear all the consequences. Don't think too much, just carry out the plan." Jiraiya said no more and immediately left Naruto's office. On Itachi's side, after leaving Naruto's office, he didn't immediately take over Mai's army. Instead, he sent out several crows to inform Hyojin about the situation in the village in detail and asked Hyojin for advice. Tsunade immediately rushed to my hospital and mobilized all the medical ninjas to evacuate the villagers in an orderly manner according to the previously set plan. Jiraiya caught up with Zhuan Shaochun and rushed to the Umbu base to inform 3 generations Tsuchikage, 4 generations Liang, and 4 generations Kazekage about the Akatsuki's upcoming attack in Mai. For a moment, the peaceful village was plunged into chaos. A series of urgent and sharp alarms echoed in the sky above the village. In the practice field next to the Uchiha clan's land, Jishuei and Shinichi, the 2 Uchiha clan's Manjikyu, are guiding Sasuke to use the Manjikyu Sharingan. Sasuke may have some shortcomings in terms of personality, but his ability to learn and absorb skills is unquestionable. After a week or 2 of targeted practice, he has gradually become proficient in the use of the Manjikyu Sharingan, and the use of some small skills has also become more and more handy. At this moment, the loud alarm stopped Sasuke's practice. He looked around blankly and asked, "Hey, what's going on with this alarm?" Jishuei and Shinichi looked at each other with a dignified expression on their faces. As the captain of the police force, they are very clear about the requirements of the village's alarm. This level of alarm is only sounded when the village encounters a major crisis and the villagers need to be evacuated immediately. Swish! Suddenly, a figure landed on the practice field. It's none other than Jiraiya, who just came from the Umbu's base. He glanced at Jishuei, Shinichi, and Sasuke and said, "You are all here." Jishuei quickly asked, "Jiraiya, Sama, what happened?" Jiraiya told the 3 Uchiha in detail about the Akatsuki's upcoming attack, and then said, "The current situation is very urgent. The Akatsuki may launch an attack on the village at any time." Sasuke was a little eager. "Sensei, what do you need me to do?" Jishuei also said, "Jiraiya, Sama, what do you need me to do?" Jiraiya looked at Jishuei and Shinichi and said, "The village does have a mission, and I need your help." Jishuei asked, "What mission?" At this time, Jiraiya took out 2 cloaks that are very similar to Amatsukumi's standard black cloaks and 2 flame patterns. "It will take some time to move the villagers, so we must delay the Akatsuki's attack. So the village needs the 2 of you to pretend to be Amatsukumi's fire demon to stop the Akatsuki." Taking the cloak and mask that are obviously rough-made from Jiraiya's hands, Jishuei had a thought in her mind. "Can I use my own?" First update, please recommend monthly votes. Chapter 1068. At this time, Shinichi shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, but I have other things to deal with." Jiraiya frowned and immediately said with a serious face, "Shinichi, this task is related to the safety of hundreds of thousands of villagers in the village. Please do not refuse. Konoha has the largest population among the 5 great shinobi villages, with a resident population of more than 100,000. After all, Konoha is the #1 shinobi village in the shinobi world that can mobilize more than 10,000 shinobi. And the evacuation of hundreds of thousands of villagers was not something that could be done in a short time, which was why 3 generations resolutely carried out Kakashi's original plan without discussing with Amatsukumi. Shinichi still shook his head and said, "I'm really sorry, but I need to deal with something more important than this." Jishuei, who knew what Shinichi wanted to do, quickly explained, "Jiraiya, Sama, Shinichi really needs to deal with a very important matter. Why don't you let me carry out this task alone?" Jiraiya said, "Everyone knows that there are 2 Homicide Amatsukumi, if it's just you alone." Without waiting for Jiraiya to finish, Sasuke muttered, "Sensei Jiraiya, have you forgotten that you still have me? I have also awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan, and pretending to be Homusubi of Amatsukumi is a piece of cake." Jiraiya was a little hesitant. Although Sasuke's strength was not bad, he was still a little too young. Sasuke took the cloak and the mask from Jiraiya's hand and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely complete the task. Besides, I still have score to settle with Akatsuki." Sasuke did not forget the debt of Akatsuki kidnapping him. Since time was tight, and Shinichi was not willing to let go, Jiraiya could only agree with Sasuke and said, "Jisue, Sasuke, you two come with me." Not long after, Jiraiya led Jisue and Sasuke to a small forest outside the village, where three figures were already waiting. Sasuke looked carefully and found that he knew the three people in the forest. They were Deadale of Rock Village, Kimimaro, and Haku of Sound Village. Jiraiya didn't waste any time and immediately handed 3 black cloaks and 3 masks with rock patterns, wind patterns, and water patterns to Deadale, Kimimaro, and Haku. He said, "From now on, you will disguise yourselves as Ksitagarba, Windchime, and Suijin from Amatsukami." Taking the cloaks and masks, Deadale looked unhappy and asked, "Why do we have to disguise ourselves as members of Amatsukami?" Jiraiya explained, "Amatsukami is very powerful. If you attack as members of Amatsukami, even if you don't fight, the Akatsuki will be afraid and delay their offensive." This, Deadale, who had been warned by the 3 generations of Tsuchikage, reluctantly put on the cloak and mask of Ksitagarba. Kimimaro and by Mo didn't say anything as they put on their own masks and cloaks. Shisui looked at Deadale, Kimimaro, Haku, and Sasuke, who were all wearing Amatsukami's uniform, and Homasuke, who was also changing his clothes. As a true member of Amatsukami, Shisui felt an indescribable sense of absurdity. But soon, he noticed that the people chosen by the village did indeed fit the characteristics of Ksitagarba, Wind Chimes, and Rivermaster, his 3 colleagues. Maybe the village's plan can be delayed until Senpai comes back. Thinking of this, Jisue also put on the inferior cloak and mask of Amatsukami. After the 5 of them finished changing their equipment, Jiraiya carefully looked around, and his gaze finally fell on Sasuke. He frowned and shook his head. Sasuke was currently less than 13 years old, and his physique was relatively small, so the cloak and mask that were originally prepared for Shinichi undoubtedly didn't fit him very well. Seeing Jiraiya shake his head, Sasuke quickly said, "I can use the transformation technique." Saying this, he made a hand seal and used the transformation technique, turning himself into a 17 or 18 years old youth. Kimimaro said with an expressionless face, "It is said that one of the 2 members of Amatsukami is a woman." As soon as Kimimaro said this, everyone's eyes focused on Sasuke. Jisue said awkwardly, "Sasuke, since you already used the transformation technique, then Sasuke didn't expect such a situation." His face turned red and he wanted to argue, but when he saw everyone looking at him, he could only grit his teeth and use the transformation technique again. This time, he turned into a 17 or 18-year-old girl. Kimimaro said calmly, "Imitating others is one of the ninja's skills. You don't need to be so nervous." Sasuke's muscles tightened, and he denied, "Who said I was nervous?" Haku said in a friendly tone, "Sasuke-san, it's okay. You don't need to feel embarrassed in front of us." Deadale nodded seriously. "Yes, we will keep it a secret for you." Assistant Zwa immediately became hysterical. "Hey, you guys, don't say any more. This kind of thing is not a problem for me. I don't feel nervous or embarrassed." After smiling, Jiraiya quickly restored his serious face and said, "You 5 have a very serious mission. It is very likely that you will be attacked by the leader of Akatsuki, Nagato, so you must be extra careful." The 5 people nodded. Jiraiya continued, "Jisue, this special squad is under your command. Your mission is to attract the attention of Akatsuki, delay their attack on the village, and buy time for the villagers to evacuate. Remember, you are not real members of Amatsukami, so you must avoid direct confrontation with the members of Akatsuki as much as possible to avoid danger or exposing your identity." Jisue pondered for a moment and confirmed, "How long do we need to delay?" Jiraiya said, "According to the estimation of the intelligence team, the detonator cloud will reach the village in about 3 hours, and it will take at least 5 hours to evacuate all the villagers, so you have to delay as much as possible for 2 hours." At this time, Deadale patted the ninja bag on his waist and said with a smile, "Don't worry. Even if the skin of Amatsukami can't deter those madmen of Akatsuki. I have other ways to delay for a while. Please. Jiraiya also bowed to the few of them. Deadale, Kimimaro, and Haku didn't dodge and accepted Jiraiya's salute. Since they are my ninjas, they don't need to take such a risk. Jisue stepped aside, while Sasuke stepped forward to support Jiraiya. Sensei, we will definitely complete the mission. Jiraiya patted Sasuke's shoulder with a complicated expression. Be careful. The corner of Sasuke's mouth rose. Sensei, your worry is unnecessary. I have awakened the man GQ Sharingan. Even if I encounter the leader of Akatsuki, I have a chance of winning. Bang! In a burst of white smoke, 2 clay birds appeared. Deadale jumped on one of them and said with a smile, Hey, we are now part of Amatsukami. Don't be so slow, let's go. Here's the second update, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Also, I want to thank the students who gave me gifts today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1069. Under Deadale's urging, Kimimaro and Haku jumped on his clay bird, while Jisue and Sasuke jumped on the other. Soon, the 2 white clay birds flapped their wings and flew into the sky. In the forest, Jiraiya watched the 2 clay birds disappear from his field of vision before letting out a faint sigh and disappearing in a flash. Although he was worried about his disciple Sasuke's safety, he had to focus on making arrangements to protect Naruto and Fumu, the 2 Jinchuriki. In the sky, a group of 5 people disguised as members of Amatsukami were sitting or standing on 2 clay birds. Their black cloaks with golden edges fluttered in the wind. At first glance, they looked quite powerful. In fact, due to the lack of time, the cloaks and masks prepared by the village were obviously inferior to the authentic ones made by Hyjin. This wasn't just the difference in craftsmanship, but also the difference in technique. The real Amatsukami's cloaks and masks were engraved with the sealing techniques of Hyjin, an expert in sealing techniques, which could block the probing of dojutsu and perceptual ninjutsu to a certain extent, especially the mask, which required a high level of skill. The angle of the opening of the eyes on the mask, the arrangement of the internal seals, and so on are the results of Suijin's rigorous experiments. It can conceal the pupils of the wearer very cleverly. Even in close combat with the enemy, it is difficult for the enemy to directly observe the true appearance of the pupils under the mask through their eyes. However, the temporary masks made by the village didn't have this effect. It could be said that apart from the appearance and the pattern on the surface, the craftsmanship and technique were very different from the authentic ones. However, it was enough to bluff people. Apart from Jisue, who had used the real Amatsukami's cloaks and masks, it would be difficult for others to notice the difference in the details. After fiddling with the cloak and mask, Jisue said to Sasuke, Sasuke, this isn't a practice, so don't act on your own. Sasuke nodded, I understand. Then, Jisue raised his voice and said to the others, Everyone, our mission this time is to slow down the Akatsuki's offensive, not to fight them head-on. So we should avoid fighting as much as possible. Deadale, who was sitting cross-legged on the clay bird, muttered, I hope that the skin of Amatsukami is as useful as you think. Kimimaro asked, If fighting is unavoidable, what should we do? Shursui answered without hesitation, If it really comes to that, we will temporarily avoid it. In short, this operation is mainly to restrain them and avoid any unnecessary battles. Sasuke curled his lips and said, Brother Jisue, your tactics are too conservative. Jisue said sternly, Sasuke, our enemy this time is likely to be the leader of Akatsuki. Even if you and I have the Manjikyu Sharingan, we are far from being his opponent. In the entire shinobi world, only the leader of Amatsukami, Yama, can be a match for him, so don't underestimate him. But before Sasuke could finish his words, Jisue interrupted him. No buts. I am the captain of this operation, so you must listen to my orders. Sasuke nodded and said, Yes. If Yama knows that Sasuke is pretending to be her, I don't know if she will get angry or not. After thinking for a while, Shursui said to Sasuke, Remember The Amitsukami Homusubi that you are currently disguised as has never been defeated by the Akatsuki members, so don't ruin her reputation. Sasuke said confidently, Brother Jishue, just watch my performance. The flying speed of the clay birds was very fast. Shursui only had time to make a simple tactical deployment. In the distance, the cloud made of detonation talismans, which was mentioned in the intelligence report, appeared faintly in the horizon. Looking at the cloud of detonation talismans, Dedale, who was sitting cross-legged, couldn't help but stand up and murmur in shock. This is simply art. Kimamaro's indifferent face showed a rare expression. Haku was also surprised. This is incredible. On the other clay bird, Jishue's expression was very serious. Because he had the Manjikyu Sharingan, he could see more information than others. In his Manjikyu Sharingan's field of vision, the cloud was emitting an indescribable chakra fluctuation. He had never seen or heard of something like this before. He couldn't imagine what kind of damage such a cloud of detonation talismans would cause if it reached the village. In the distance, almost at the same time when Jishue and the others discovered the cloud of detonation talismans, Nagato, Konan, and White Zetsu's doppelganger also discovered them. Konan frowned and said, It's Amitsukami. Nagato nodded indifferently. A specially made by Ju clone, who was being carried by Little Nan's paper escape technique, observed the Gods Organization's members on the two clay birds in the distance, and said in slight astonishment, How strange. Gods Organization usually has 2 members working together. I can't believe they actually sent 5 people at once this time. Konan was a little worried. It seems that Amitsukami is prepared. Almost subconsciously, Konan stopped the advancement of the detonation talismans. This detonation talisman cloud was made up of more than 400 billion detonation talismans. Konan originally planned to use it to deal with Obsidian, but as Nagato's strength increased, Obsidian's threat to them was getting smaller and smaller, so she used all the detonation talismans in this final battle. The special doppelganger ordered the doppelganger on the ground to search around, and after confirming that there were no other members of Amitsukami, he introduced to Nagato and Konan. The 5 members of Amitsukami on the other side are Balrog, Windshim, Xidagarba, and Suijin. Among them, the male Balrog, Windshim, and Xidagarba needs special attention. Nagato and Konan listened quietly, and they didn't interrupt the doppelganger's introduction. On the other side, seeing that the detonation talisman cloud stopped, the 5 people on the clay birds secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Without a doubt, their disguise as Amitsukami had worked. Even if they just showed their faces from afar, Akatsuki immediately responded. Dedale said with a guilty conscience, Hey, if it's just a confrontation, I'm afraid it won't last long. Jishue braced herself and said while thinking of a countermeasure, Let's drag it out as long as we can. First update, it's the end of the month. Students who still have monthly votes, don't forget to vote. Chapter 1070. The male, Homusubi, wields a divine artifact called the Sword of 10 Fists. It is a sealing sword that even Izanagi could not break. Once you are sealed by it, you will fall into a befuddled illusion and be unable to free yourself. The bone vein of Kaze is different from the normal Kagaya clansman. It is extremely destructive, and even Susanoo could not defend against it. Moreover, it can suppress Hiriko in terms of physical arts, and it has mastered the magnetic release Kekiai Genkai limit, which makes it very dangerous. The Xidagarba has mastered the dust release Kekiai Genkai limit, so he is also very dangerous. Although the female Homusubi is strong, according to the information we have collected so far, she does not seem to have any skills that are too dangerous. As for the ice release Kekiai Genkai, Suijin is weaker than the other members of Amitsukami. While the doppelganger on the ground was scouting around, the special doppelganger in the detonation talisman, Cloud, introduced the situation of the members of Amitsukami to Nagato and Konan. After all, Nagato and Konan had been fighting with the leader of Amitsukami, Yama, while the Obsidian had more contact with the other members of Amitsukami. Nagato listened quietly, and his eyes were extremely cold. In his eyes, the other members of Amitsukami were not worth mentioning. From the beginning to the end, the only person he really cared about was the leader of Amitsukami, Otsutsuki Samurai. Meanwhile, Conan looked around vigilantly. She knew very well that although the 5 members of Amitsukami were difficult to deal with, the one who could really decide the outcome of this battle was the leader of Amitsukami. On the ground, the patrol team of Mai, who had been watching the detonation talisman cloud from afar, was quite surprised to see the cloud suddenly stop. At this time, a member of the patrol team pointed at the sky on the other side. "Captain, is that Amitsukami?" The captain of the patrol team quickly looked over and saw that on the other side of the sky, there were 2 white birds, and there were 5 mysterious people wearing black cloaks and various patterns on their faces. "Amitsukami. It is Amitsukami." The captain of the patrol team nodded repeatedly, and there was a hint of joy in his voice. At this time, the members of the patrol team asked, "Captain, what should we do now?" At one end of the sky was a cloud formed by detonation talismans that blotted out the sun. Just looking at it from afar would make one lose the will to resist. On the other side, there were 5 members of Amitsukami, each of whom was a living legend in the shinobi world. Sandwiched between these 2 forces, the members of Amitsukami felt instinctively uneasy. "This is not a battle we can interfere in." After a pause, the patrol leader immediately corrected him. "No, this is no longer a battle that we can monitor. Amitsukami." Almost all the Amitsukami, Rei retreat and Amitsukami and ninjas Amitsukami and Sen and the Ninja King at the Tribe King, the end of the King, and the ninjas Amur, homage, and the King and the of King, and Sen is the of is. The confrontation in the sky is still ongoing. Feeling the huge pressure coming from the totem, the 5 people on the clay bird felt very uncomfortable. Even Deadale, who has always been fearless, had a solemn expression under his mask. At this time, Haku quietly entered sage mode, using nature energy to perceive the forest on the ground, and said, "The patrols monitoring the totem are retreating, and the other party is also sending people to search the ground. It seems that they want to check if there is an ambush on our side." Jishui understands that the other party is not worried about an ambush, but is looking for the traces of the leader of Amitsukami. But only he knows that Hyojin is not in the land of fire at the moment. So he asks with a guilty conscience, "How fast is the other party investigating?" Haku replied, "Very fast. The other party has a lot of chakra on the ground. The number is about 200 to 300, and with their current speed, it will take them at most 15 minutes to thoroughly investigate the entire forest." Dedale glanced at Haku and said, "What? 15 minutes?" As soon as he heard that there is only 15 minutes left, Sasuke's body faintly trembled. It is unknown whether it is because of excitement or fear or both. Compared to the other 4 members of the team, he has the least combat experience. And now he is facing one of the 2 strongest shinobi in the world, the leader of Akatsuki. Noticing the ups and downs of Sasuke's emotions, Jishui comforted him. "Don't be nervous. We are now pretending to be Amitsukami. Even if the other party finishes investigating, they may not immediately launch an attack." Kimimaro glanced at Sasuke and said, "I won't let you die." Sasuke's face suddenly turned red. "Humph, take care of yourself. Our Uchiha is never afraid of fighting." Time passed, and in this calm and suffocating confrontation, 15 minutes passed in a flash. Counting the time, Dedale put his hands into the ninja bag on his waist and slightly narrowed his eyes. Kimimaro took out a pill, put it in his mouth, and chewed it gently. This is a pill specially made for him by Tsunade. After taking it, the effect will barely last for 20 minutes, and during these 20 minutes, his blood disease will be temporarily suppressed. Haku, who has been absorbing nature's chakra with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes and looked at the detonation runes in front of him. At this moment, the 3 Sharingan in Jishui's eye sockets also changed into the form of a 4-edged shuriken, and she whispered to Sasuke, "Remember, don't use Susanoo unless it is a critical moment. It will expose our identity." Sasuke nodded and asked, "What about Amaterasu?" Whoosh, whoosh, without waiting for Jishui to answer, an ear-piercing whistling sound was heard, and two-tailed beast jades shot out from the forest on the ground, shooting towards the two clay birds in the air at lightning speed. The attention of the 5 people on the clay bird was currently focused on the detonation cloud, so when faced with this sudden attack, everyone, including Dead Ale, was caught off guard. They simply didn't have time to urge the clay bird to evade, so they could only jump off the clay bird one after another. Rumble. In an instant, the 2 clay birds that were hit by the tailed beast jades exploded in the air like fireworks. While falling, Jishui immediately stabilized his body and shouted to his companions, "Our task is to slow down the enemy's attack. Remember, don't fight recklessly." The others who were also falling didn't have time to respond, and under the impact of the explosion, they scattered in the lush forest. Whoosh, using the dense canopy as a buffer, Sasuke barely landed on the ground, looked around, and didn't find any of his companions. The first update is here, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. Chapter 1071. Rumble. The continuous explosions in the distance and the faint trembling of the ground under his feet all told Sasuke that at this moment, his companions had already started fighting with the enemy. Excitement, and a trace of panic hidden in the bottom of his heart made Sasuke restless. At this moment, a surging chakra came from afar and quickly came toward Sasuke's direction. Even if Sasuke wasn't a perceptual ninja, he could easily detect the aggressive enemy because the enemy didn't have the slightest intention to hide his intentions. Not only did he not restrain his chakra, but he also didn't even avoid the trees and bushes along the way. It was simply a rampage, leaving a whole path of smoke. Is it coming? The 3 Sharingan in Sasuke's eye sockets quickly changed into a 6-pointed star pattern. Then he took out a kunai from the ninja bag on his waist and placed it in front of him. Staring at the rising smoke in the distance, the corner of his mouth slightly curled up. No matter who you are, looking for me is your biggest mistake. Whether it's Amatsukami or Akatsuki, I will let you guys understand how stupid it is to be an enemy of Uchiha. In his excitement, he had forgotten Jishui's words just now, and only thought about how to prove himself. He didn't have the slightest intention to meet up with his lost companions. In just a few breaths of time, the approaching figure hit several trees in a row, accompanied by a rumbling sound, and arrived in front of Sasuke. After seeing the approaching person, Sasuke's eyes narrowed. Although the person was wearing the Akatsuki's signature red cloud clothes, Sasuke knew the person's appearance. He frowned slightly. "Hey, aren't you Cloud Village's Hachibi's Jinchuriki? How did you join the Akatsuki?" Chila Bai, who had been made into the hungry ghost realm, had long lost his own consciousness. Under Nagato's control, he did not utter a single word of nonsense and fiercely pounced toward Sasuke. Sasuke, who was observing the strange black rods inlaid on Chilabai's face, said with some regret, "Since you have betrayed Kyumo, then I can only treat you as a traitorous ninja and kill you." After saying that, Sasuke went forward on the other side. 2 silhouettes shuttled through the forest like ghosts. Their movements were so swift that they even left behind 2 long afterimages in broad daylight. It was a dazzling sight. The figures in the battle were none other than Jishui and the 6-tailed human pillar Li Gao, who had been made into the Tao of the human realm. Jishui, who had the title of teleportation, was undeniably fast. Yu Gao, who had transformed into a tailed beast, was also the fastest among the few human Jinchuriki that were made into the 6 paths of pain. As a result, there was this scene in front of them. 2 afterimages constantly shuttled through the forest, sometimes colliding, sometimes chasing. Every time their figures crossed paths, there would be a sharp and ear-piercing sound of metal clashing, accompanied by splattering sparks. Clang, after another confrontation, Jishui's figure swayed, and he pulled some distance from Yu Gao. Just like Sasuke, when he found out that the attacker was the 6-tailed human pillar Li Gao of the Mist Village, he was also quite surprised. However, when he noticed the black rods on Yu Gao's face, he immediately guessed what happened to Yu Gao, so he did not waste his breath. At this time, he glanced at the kunai in his hand out of the corner of his eye, and his expression slightly froze. The kunai in his hand, which was forged from fine steel, was rusty at the moment. Not only that, but the traces of corrosion seemed to be spreading, making a poochie-poochie sound of burning. Throwing away the kunai in his hand, Jishui realized that after transforming into a tailed beast, Yugao's claws were not only as hard and sharp as metal, but the tailed beast coat was also extremely corrosive. Oh no! If the other human Jinchuriki that were captured by the Akatsuki organization were all made into the 6 paths of pain, then Sasuke will be in danger. With this thought, Jishui suddenly did not want to entangle with Yugao anymore. When Sasuke and Jishui were attacked by the 8-tailed human pillar Chilabai, who was made into the hungry ghost path, and the 6-tailed human pillar Ligao was made into the mortal path. When Yugao attacked, the 4-tailed human pillar Old Purple was made into the Naraka path, and the 5-tailed human pillar Han was made into the Azura path. On the other side, the 2-tailed human pillar Limudo, who was made into the animal path, quickly made a seal and shouted in an ethereal tone, "Psychic technique." Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, several clouds of white smoke surged in the surroundings. After the white smoke dissipated, a huge chameleon, a 3-headed hellhound, a strange bird with a sharp beak, and 3 giant centipedes appeared in front of Dedale. Then, the Mudo stepped on the chameleon's tongue and entered the chameleon's mouth. Then, her figure gradually disappeared from Dedale's sight. Surrounded by many huge psychic beasts, Dedale smiled. "Everyone, the time to witness art has come." Yeah. In the cloud of exploding talismans in the air, Nagato looked at the forest that was exploding from time to time with an indifferent expression. The special white Zetsu clone said, "Yugao's speed is the fastest, so it's the safest for him to entangle the male Balrog. Han is a body technique type ninja, so his speed isn't slow either, so he should be able to entangle Winchim in a short time. The Mudo's psychic beast is the most suitable to consume Xidagarba's chakra. Even if Xidagarba uses dust release, it won't cause any substantial damage to us." Little South gently nodded and asked, "What about the other 2? The white Zetsu clone explained, "The female Balrog and the weakest Suijin are our breakthrough points. The strongest Chilabai should have no problem defeating the female Balrog. Then, he can cooperate with Yugao to attack the male Balrog. As for Suijin, Old Purple should be able to finish the battle quickly. Then, he can cooperate with Han to attack Winchim. As for Xidagarba, we can leave him for the last." Yeah. Little South expressed his agreement with the white Zetsu clone suggestion. "Let's continue forward," Nagato said lightly at this time, as if the fierce battle on the ground was nothing to him. Little South didn't waste any more words and once again activated the exploding talisman cloud that covered the sky, advancing towards the direction of my village. In the forest, White, who was fighting with Old Purple, noticed that the exploding talisman cloud in the sky was floating again. His heart shivered, and he immediately didn't care much. He quickly formed a seal and shouted, "Water release, great waterfall technique." Whoosh! In an instant, a huge wave rushed towards Old Purple. Before Old Purple could break free from the huge wave, White put his palms together. Immortal technique, frozen coffin. In an instant, the huge wave condensed into a cold frost, and Old Purple, who was trapped in a huge wave, was also completely frozen. From afar, he looked like a huge ice coffin. After instantly killing Old Purple, White's body swayed and disappeared on the spot. Then, countless ice mirrors appeared in the sky, and these ice mirrors combined to become a huge ice mirror that cut off the sky and earth, blocking the path of the exploding talisman cloud. The second update is here. It's the last day. Please support me with your monthly votes. If you don't vote now, it'll be a waste. Chapter 1072. A huge ice mirror composed of countless ice mirrors appeared in front of the detonation talisman cloud, blocking the path of Nagato, Conan, and the others. At this time, the sun shone on the mirror. In an instant, under the illumination of the sun, the sparkling and translucent surface of the mirror reflected a brilliant brilliance, reflected in the air, and finally transformed into a gorgeous rainbow. This rainbow stretched between the ice mirror and the detonation talisman cloud, and under the lingering cold mist emitted from the ice mirror, it seemed like a dream. Looking at this unreal scene, Conan frowned and asked the special white Zetsu clone next to him, "Are you sure that Tenseigan is the weakest one among them?" The special white Zetsu clone was also stunned at this moment. This is impossible. Zetsu has been collecting information about Amatsukami, and he is very familiar with the achievements of each member of Amatsukami. According to the information, the most outstanding achievement of Tenseigan was escaping the pursuit of 3 generations Naruto together with Homusubi. Other than that, Tenseigan had no other achievements, so Zetsu thought that Tenseigan was at most at the level of a Jonin. Who would have thought that Tenseigan was so strong that he was able to instantly trap the 4 tails Jinchuriki that was made into the Naruto realm and displayed such an exaggerated ice-release ninjutsu, showing a terrifying strength beyond the normal Kage level. Looking at the huge mirror in front of him that seemed to have no end, a strange light flashed in Nagato's eyes, but soon he restored his usual indifference and slowly raised his arm. Conan hurriedly stopped Nagato. "Let me do it. Your opponent is Otsutsuki Samurai. Don't waste chakra on others." Nagato nodded and slowly put down his arm. At this time, Conan slowly turned her head and looked at the huge ice mirror blocking the way. Her eyes gradually became cold. As a paper-release ninja, surrounded by 400 billion detonation talismans, she was a god of destruction that could destroy all the targets in her sight. As she slowly formed a hand seal, the detonation talismans floating in the cloud of detonation talismans quickly moved. Among them, the outermost layer of detonation talismans automatically folded like paper and instantly folded into the shape of a shuriken. Then, accompanied by a whistling sound, the shurikens shot towards the huge ice mirror not far away. At the same time, the cold mist surrounding the ice mirror condensed into 1,000 sharp icicles that shot towards the explosive cloud, causing a sharp whistling sound that pierced through the air. On the ground, looking at the huge ice mirror in the sky, Jishuei was touched and lamented, "Sigh, I still lack experience." He did not expect that Haku, as a ninja of sound, would go to such lengths to help Mai evacuate the villagers. However, as a ninja who had really fought with Nagato, he was very clear that their team could not defeat Nagato. Their mission was to move around and restrain Nagato. If they wanted to win in the end, the only way was to delay until Hyojin rushed back to the village. However, apart from him, the members of the team had no real experience of fighting with Nagato. In addition, they were all the best of a younger generation, so it was easy for them to misjudge the strength of both sides, causing unnecessary casualties. Although Haku was very outstanding among his peers, it was far from enough to fight with Nagato. As the leader of this team, Jishuei had to ensure the safety of every member of the team. He could not let these ninjas who fought for my die here. Rumble. At this time, a series of dense explosions came from the sky. The detonation talisman shurikens that shot out from the detonation talisman cloud were like raindrops, shooting at the huge ice mirror layer by layer. Bing Qianben, who was on the ice mirror, did not show any weakness and met the detonation talisman shurikens in an overwhelming manner. Both sides had a shocking number of shurikens, so a simple collision caused a continuous explosion like the end of the world, causing the whole sky to flicker. Seeing this, Jishuei thought to himself, "Fortunately, Nagato did not attack. As long as Nagato doesn't make a move, then Haku is safe for the time being." Although it is a very uneconomical exchange to use his own chakra against the detonation talisman, at least Haku temporarily stopped the detonation talisman cloud from advancing. After confirming that Haku was not in danger for the time being, Jishuei continued to fight with Yugao while looking for traces of Sasuke in the forest. On Sasuke's side, clang, clang, clang. The ear-piercing sound of metal clashing constantly sounded in the forest, and every time it sounded, there would be dazzling sparks. In the fierce battle, Sasuke's face was filled with a strong sense of disbelief. He did not expect that his opponent's physical skills would be even more powerful than his own Manjikyu Sharingan. The 7 long swords in his opponent's hands were even more tricky, strange, and unpredictable. Even a Manjikyu Sharingan could not completely see through them. After another round of confrontation, Sasuke reluctantly retreated, gasping for breath. Drip, drip. At this time, drops of blood dripped from Sasuke's body to the ground. At this moment, his black cloak with golden edges was covered with knife marks of different sizes. His face, neck, arms, and waist were all covered with wounds of different depths, dripping with blood. Damn it! Sasuke was a little angry. Kuroto never thought that he would lose to this inexplicable guy in front of him in terms of taijutsu, even though he has mastered the lightning release stimulation technique and has the Manjikyu Sharingan. Because of the explosion in the air, smoke and dust were everywhere, and at this time the light in the forest became dim. Sasuke glanced at the sky and found that Haku had already fought with the real Akatsuki members, and he was tied down by a Kyumo traitor. So he said to Chalabi in front of him, "Idiot, you asked for this." Suddenly, Sasuke's eyes narrowed, and a black flame shot out from his pupils, and in the blink of an eye, it burned Chalabi's body. Looking at Chalabi, who was burned by the black flame, Sasuke ignored the blood and tears flowing from his eyes, and the corner of his mouth raised. "Humph! In my pair of Manjikyu Sharingan, you are nothing." After saying that, Sasuke shifted his gaze and looked around, remembering to confirm the situation of his other companions. Whoosh! At this moment, Chalabi, who was burned by Sasuke's Amaterasu, suddenly flashed and rushed toward Sasuke. "You?" Hearing the movement, Sasuke looked at Chalabi in surprise. At this moment, he instinctively felt the danger and subconsciously activated Susanoo. Almost at the moment when Sasuke activated Susanoo, Chalabi, who used Thunder Plow Hot Blade, rushed in front of him. Kachisusa that had just been projected from Sasuke's body was broken. The first update, the last 6 hours for monthly votes. Chapter 1073. Fortunately, my family and friends haven't been infected yet, which is quite a relief for me. I thought that I could write peacefully like this, but in reality, I couldn't calm down at all. After a while, I would want to check the news, check the situation of the epidemic, or confirm the situation of my family and friends. Although I'm not panicking, I'm very anxious. I don't know if everyone is the same as me. Coupled with the pressure of not being able to go out, my writing condition is very bad, which resulted in not many updates. I would like to apologize to everyone here. I'm really sorry. Sigh. I was originally prepared to continuously release more chapters at the climax, but I didn't expect to encounter such a thing. I can only beg for everyone's understanding. I will also do my best to adjust my condition and do my best to satisfy everyone. There are only 6 hours left of this month, and the top 5 monthly votes will be rewarded. I'm currently ranked 6th, so I'm asking for monthly votes, and I hope everyone can support me. Chapter 1074. At that moment, Sasuke felt as if he had been hit by a speeding train. A huge force poured onto his body, causing him to be unable to stabilize his body. His whole body flew out like a kite with a broken string. Boom, boom, boom. With a loud bang, he knocked down 7 or 8 trees in a row, stirring up a long trail of smoke before he finally stopped. What? What happened? Lying in the ruins, Sasuke was still in a daze. He was sure that his Amaterasu had hit his opponent, so he let his guard down a little. He did not expect his opponent to be able to burst out with such a fierce counterattack. Puff! Soon, Sasuke's chest tightened and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Only then did he realize that if he had not instinctively activated Susanoo just now and paid the price of Susanoo instantly breaking to offset most of the opponent's strength, he would have been seriously injured even if he did not die. Thinking of this, he staggered to his feet and glared fiercely at the opposite side. At this moment, Chilabai's body was still burning with the black flame of Amaterasu. His eye-catching red cloud robe had already been burned into a mess. Even his 7 sabers were gradually twisted and deformed under the burning of the black flame. As he coughed, Sasuke sneered and said, "Ahem, this is not an ordinary fire release. Just wait for your death." In private, Sasuke had done several experiments, so he was very clear that the power of Amaterasu was far more than the ordinary fire release. Once it touched his body, unless he took the initiative to extinguish it, the black flame of Amaterasu would burn endlessly until it was completely burned. However, as soon as Sasuke's voice fell, the black flame that was burning all over Chalabi's body silently extinguished in front of him. Sasuke's eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. At this time, Chilabai, who was burned to the point that smoke was rising from his body, slowly opened his mouth and said in an inexplicable, indifferent tone, "Your Susanoo is not golden, and you're not a Balrog. Who are you?" Sasuke did not reply, as he was still immersed in the shock of his Amaterasu being extinguished by his opponent. There is no doubt that he doesn't know that in addition to being sealed, the Rinnegan's ability to absorb ninjutsu can also restrain the black flames of Amaterasu, and the Karabi in front of him happens to be one of the 6 paths of pains that has the ability to absorb ninjutsu. You don't want to tell me? At this time, Hungry Ghost Realm Chilabai's figure flashed, and he once again activated Thunder Plow Hot Blade. However, this time was different from before. Before he used it, he put on the coat of a tailed beast, and his speed and strength had a qualitative leap. Sasuke quickly activated Susanoo and stretched out his arms in front of him to protect himself. Boom! With another loud explosion, Sasuke and his Susanoo were knocked back more than 10 meters, and a large part of the forest was blown away. Puff! After barely blocking this blow, Sasuke spat out a mouthful of blood again. The stinging pain from the excessive consumption of his pupil power and the suffocation in his chest made his consciousness a little dazed. He shook his head to concentrate, but found that the enemy in his eyes had a double image. His eyesight was declining due to excessive consumption of the pupil power, and it was revealed at this moment, which made him unable to adapt for a while. Hungry Ghost Realm Chilabai walked slowly toward Sasuke and said lightly, "Sure enough, you are not a real fire demon. You are so weak." Listening to Chilabai's words, Sasuke, who was covering his Manjikyu Sharingan, immediately twisted his expression. "Damn, you bastard! How dare you look down on me?" After roaring, regardless of the decline of his eyesight, he forcibly activated Susanoo again. Not only that, but he also activated Amaterasu and Earth Life. At the same time as 2 lines of blood tears flowed from his eyes, his purple Susanoo assumed the posture of drawing a bow and shooting an arrow. At the same time, the black flame of Amaterasu, which had been changed by Earth Life, covered the whole body of the arrow. "Go to hell, you damned traitorous ninja!" Swish, accompanied by Sasuke's hysterical roar. His Susanoo also shot the arrow covered with the black flame of Amaterasu. With a whistling sound, the arrow instantly hit Chilabai on the opposite side, causing a huge explosion, and Chilabai's location was completely engulfed by the explosion. Looking at the thick smoke rising in front of him, Sasuke coughed up blood and said to himself, I didn't bring shame to the Uchiha clan." While speaking, this Susanoo that covered his whole body quickly shed its weapons and armor, and then its figure became blurred, leaving only a skeleton, and finally, even the skeleton gradually faded, annihilating in front of Sasuke. At this time, a gust of wind blew, blowing away the smoke in the opposite sky. Sasuke looked over with his blurred vision and found a figure standing quietly in the smoke that was blown away. He frowned and carefully identified it. Then his face stiffened, and he exclaimed, "How is this possible?" Hungry Ghost Realm Chilabai didn't say a word, and once again slowly walked towards Sasuke, whose pupil power was almost exhausted. "You don't come over." Sasuke wanted to retreat, but just as he was about to exert force, his feet softened, and he half knelt down. Not only did the thunderly hot knife at the very beginning consume a large amount of his ocular power, but it also caused his chest to suffer a serious injury. His breathing was slightly hurried, and his lungs were in excruciating pain, causing him to be unable to exert any strength in his entire body. Chilabai didn't stop and looked at Sasuke with disdain. Sasuke, who was retreating awkwardly, hit a big tree at this time, and there was no way to retreat. He was in a desperate situation, and now he remembered that Jishui told him before he set off, telling him not to fight the enemy head-on. At this moment, his mind subconsciously reviewed his tactical mistakes, but in the face of the enemy that was getting closer and closer, such a review seemed meaningless. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, shurikens shot out from the forest and nailed in front of Chilabai, causing him to stop. Then, a figure landed in front of Sasuke and asked, "Sasuke, are you okay?" Sasuke was immediately overjoyed and said, "Brother Jishui." Obviously, the person who arrived in time was Jishui, who had been looking for Sasuke. Because the movement here was too big, he quickly locked onto this place and arrived in time. Glancing at Sasuke, who was in a mess, Jishui was quite surprised. "How did you get hurt so badly in such a short time?" Sasuke pointed at Chilabai not far away and said with hatred, "That traitorous ninja can absorb ninjutsu." Jishui shook his head. "He is not a traitorous ninja. He is just one of the 6 paths of pain of the Akatsuki leader. I've already told you that the Akatsuki leader is not someone we can deal with. Here's the second update, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Also, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone." Chapter 1075. Looking at Sasuke's wounded and miserable appearance, Jishui swallowed the scolding that was about to come out of his mouth and only sighed his heart. "Sigh, I really shouldn't have let Sasuke participate in such a dangerous mission." He knew that Sasuke had been holding back his anger because of his failure in the Chunin exam and wanted to find an opportunity to prove himself. But this mission was too rushed from the assembly to the encounter. The whole process only took a few minutes, and the time left for him to deploy tactics on the road was only a short 10 minutes. So he didn't have time to introduce the details of the Akatsuki members to Sasuke. Not to mention, even he didn't expect that the Akatsuki would use the Jinchuriki of the villages to make the 6 paths of pain. Soon, Shursui shifted his gaze to Chilabai on the opposite side. From Sasuke's description just now, he knew that Chalabi of Cloud Village should have been made into the 6 paths of pain by the Akatsuki organization, the Hungry Ghost Path, which has the ability to absorb ninjutsu. And thinking of this, the expression on his face under the mask was extremely solemn. In terms of physical skills alone, Chalabi of Cloud Village can be said to be the strongest of the Jinchuriki. Even looking at the entire shinobi world, there are only a few people who can beat him in physical skills. Now he has the ability to absorb ninjutsu in the Hungry Ghost Path. This ability can absorb almost all ninjutsu, including the Kekkei Genkai, and even some immortal arts that don't have a high concentration of chakra can be absorbed to a certain extent. In the original time and space, Jiraiya and the 2 Toad Masters joined forces to cast the 5 Right Guard Gate. Immortal art was once absorbed by the Hungry Ghost Path. In addition, with Nagato's current pupil power, it is very difficult for the pupil technique illusion to work on the 6 paths of pain, so Chalabi of Hungry Ghost Path in front of him has no shortcomings at all. Meeting such an opponent, I really can't blame Sasuke. It's my dereliction of duty. Without a doubt, Sasuke's crushing defeat was due to his underestimation of his opponent and his tactical mistakes, as well as the fact that his opponent was too strong. Faced with Jishui's sudden appearance, Hungry Ghost Realm's Chi-La-Bai was not surprised at all. This was because at almost the same time Jishui appeared, Mortal Realm's Yu-Gao arrived and leaped onto the trunk of a nearby tree. The vision of the 6 paths of pain was shared, so Jishui's movements were always under the surveillance of the 6 paths of pain. At this moment, the Hungry Ghost Realm's Chilabai, whose body was still emitting green smoke, strode forward again. He slowly walked toward Jishui and Sasuke while asking coldly, "Who are you? Why are you pretending to be the Balrog from God's organization?" Hearing this, Jishui immediately realized that Sasuke's identity had been exposed. The reason why they could attract the attention of Akatsuki and make Nagato worry about not making a move himself was because they were pretending to be members of God's organization. Because only when the real members of God's organization appeared here, Nagato would think that the leader of God's organization was also paying attention to them and might join the battle at any time. So, Nagato didn't dare to make a move rashly and was on guard against the arrival of the leader of God's organization. Once Nagato confirmed that the one who stopped them wasn't the real God's organization, it would mean that the leader of God's organization wasn't paying attention to them. Then, it would be hard to predict what Nagato would do next. No, if our identities are exposed, and they know that Senpai isn't in the country of fire and isn't paying attention to us, then we won't even be able to protect ourselves, let alone hold back the Akatsuki's attack. Knowing that the only thing Nagato was worried about was Hyojin, Jishui understood that if he didn't use Hyojin's name, it would be hard for them to get out of here alive. So, he immediately thought of a countermeasure. Then, he forced himself to be alert and said to Chillabai of the Hungry Ghost Realm, who was walking towards him, pretending to be Balrog from God's organization, who said that there are only 2 Homusubi in God's organization. He really isn't Uchiha no. He's just an intern in God's organization, and the test the leader gave him is this battle. Pausing for a moment, Jishui chuckled and said, "Oh, it seems that his probation period will be extended." "Intern? Uchiha no." Chillabai and Sasuke were attracted by Jishui's words at the same time. Nagato was surprised that there were more than 2 Homusubi in God's organization. While Sasuke was attracted by the name Uchiha no Homusubi, he realized that this was probably the name of the female Homusubi in God's organization, but he didn't know why Jishui knew this secret information of God's organization. Shursui frowned when he saw that Hungry Ghost Realm's Chillabai did not stop and was still approaching. He quickly formed a seal and pressed his palms on the ground. Walala! In the blink of an eye, wooden stakes extended out from the ground and wrapped around the Hungry Ghost Realm's Chillabai, temporarily restraining him in place. Wood Release, which contained the characteristics of the Divine Tree, had a certain resistance to the Rinnegan's ability to absorb ninjutsu, and the wooden stakes created by Wood Release were the same as the soil, sand, and stones. They were all real substances. So once the activation was completed, Chillabai could only absorb the chakra left on it, not the wooden stakes. Wood Release? Chillabai of the Hungry Ghost Realm, who was restrained by Would Escape, was slightly stunned. The injured Sasuke was also surprised. He didn't expect Jishui to be able to use the first-generation Naruto's ultimate skill, Would Release Blood Limit Boundary. Shursui, who had temporarily trapped Hungry Ghost Realm Chillabai, suppressed the anxiety in his heart and pretended to say casually, "The leader said that this is a game, and he wants to play with you slowly." After saying that, without waiting for Chillabai to reply, Jishui turned around and hurriedly ran away with the injured Sasuke. "A game? Otsutsuki Samurai. I will let you understand that this is not a game." Looking at Shursui and Sasuke, who were leaving in a hurry, Hungry Ghost Path, Chillabai broke free from the wooden stake that didn't have the chakra blessing of Wood Release and chased after them with Human Path Yugao. While running, Sasuke asked softly, "Brother Jishui, what you said just now, is it true? Is that Uchiha Homusubi the real Homusubi? Also, how do you know Wood Release?" Feeling the approaching Chillabai and Human Realm Jishui said, "Now is not the time to talk about this. If I get entangled by them later, you have to take care of yourself." Sasuke said with a little guilt, "Sorry, I'm dragging you down." Jishui shook his head and didn't say anything else. He jumped on top of the tree and observed the situation of the other battlefields. In the sky, the battle between the Detonation Talisman and Bing Qianbin was still continuing. However, in this kind of exchange, Bai was clearly at a disadvantage, so it was hard to predict how long Bai could last. On the other side, Dedale seemed to be in a state of ecstasy. The spiritual beast created by Animal Realm Yugao had become his best explosion target. Looking at the explosions in the distance, Jishui wasn't even sure if he still remembered this mission. Whoosh! At this time, Kimimaro suddenly rushed to Jishui's side and Sasuke's side. Seeing the injured Sasuke, Kimimaro said in an unsurprised tone, "It's good that you're not dead." First update. The dialogue at the end of yesterday's chapter has been corrected. The dialogue between Jishui and Sasuke shouldn't have added names. I didn't notice it when I checked, and only realized it after uploading it. I'm so stupid. It's a new month. I beg for everyone's guaranteed monthly tickets. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1076. Hearing Kimimaro's calm words, Sasuke was embarrassed. Fortunately, he was wearing the mask of Fire Demon. Otherwise, he would be too ashamed to show his face. Rumble. At this time, another violent explosion came from the sky. In the deafening sound of the explosion, the three people on the tree subconsciously raised their heads and looked at the sky. They looked at the battlefield that was filled with smoke. At this time, there was no rainbow in the sky anymore. The sun was completely obscured by a large patch of gray clouds that resembled dark clouds and smoke, causing the entire sky to appear incomparably gloomy, as if doomsday had arrived. In the sky filled with the pungent smoke, Minami, who had turned into an angel, stood in the air. Under the protection of countless detonation talismans, the explosions that flickered, and the dark clouds that covered the sky, she looked like an angel of death who was going to destroy the world. Compared to Minami, who had an inexhaustible supply of detonation talismans, even if Haku could absorb natural energy, Chakra's amount couldn't keep up with it for a long time. Therefore, as the explosions continued, the shurikens of the detonation talismans gradually suppressed Bing Qianbin and pushed the explosions to the front of the huge ice mirror. At the same time, some of the shurikens of the detonation talismans changed their direction and used the continuous explosions to break the ice layer that imprisoned Old Purple, releasing Naraka. As soon as Naraka was free, he immediately turned into a tailed beast and appeared on the top of a big tree. He raised his head and shot a jade-tailed beast at the huge ice mirror. Whoosh! Along with the ear-piercing screech that couldn't even be covered by the rumbling explosion, the jade-tailed beast struck on the ice mirror. Crack! Along with a cracking sound that attracted everyone's attention, the huge ice mirror that was blocking the detonation talismans was hit by the jade-tailed beast, leaving a hole that was about 100 meters in diameter. The cracks on the hole quickly spread, and in the blink of an eye, the huge ice mirror was full of cracks. On the ground, Kimimaro said calmly, "Haku's chakra is almost used up, and the ice mirror can't be maintained for much longer." Sasuke hurriedly asked, "Then what should we do now?" Jishui looked at the time and said, "From the beginning of the battle, we only persisted for 11 minutes. Including the 15 minutes of confrontation before, we have delayed for less than half an hour. This is far from enough." Kimimaro thought for a moment and said, "I can delay for a while." Shaking her head, Jishui emphasized, "There's no need to fight recklessly. Our existence itself is a form of restraint." Whether it was Sasuke, Haku, or Kimimaro, they couldn't understand Amatsukumi's power over the Akatsuki. Only Jishui, who was a true member of Amatsukumi, understood this point. At this moment, the ice mirror in the sky began to shatter on a large scale. Countless ice shards fell along with the cold mist, as if there was a violent hailstorm in the sky. Bathed in the falling ice shards, Dedale recovered from the fierce battle with the animal path and curled his lips. "Ice release, kid. Can it be done already?" Immediately after, he looked at Conan, who was spreading her wings like an angel, with an infatuated look on his face, muttering to himself, "What an intoxicating art. It seems that the Akatsuki isn't useless after all." While talking, he put his hand in the ninja bag on his waist and took out a large ball of explosive clay and stuffed it into his mouth. After chewing for a while, he spat out the explosive clay in his mouth onto the ground. Panting, he grinned. "But now let me show you my art." This is a C5 firework that I've specially prepared to deal with Amatsukumi's Balrog. After being cleaned up by Hyojin's fire clone, Dedail has been thinking about ways to restrain the Homasubi of Amatsukumi and the Homasubi of Amatsukumi. Therefore, he combined the C3 number 18 with the C4 Garuda that he developed not long ago, and developed the C5 firework that not only has a large area of effect, but also contains a small bomb that can penetrate the Susanoo. In the air, the special white Zetsu clone said, "I didn't expect the Suijin of Amatsukumi to be so difficult to deal with. It seems that any member of Amatsukumi must pay enough attention to him." Conan nodded slowly, also recognizing the strength of the Suijin. For her, who has mastered the paper release, as long as she has the explosive talismans, she can launch endless attacks. But the other party has only relied on his chakra to entangle her for so long. His strength is already very strong. Nagato said, "Let's continue forward." "Okay." After responding, Conan waved her hands, and the explosive talisman cloud once again advanced in Mai's direction. But just as the explosive talisman cloud started moving, a huge Xidagarba swelled up from the ground and blocked in front of the explosive talisman cloud like a giant. At this time, Dedail, who was standing on a clay bird, flew to the sky and shouted towards Nagato inside the explosive talisman cloud, "Don't blink." At this moment, whether it was Nagato and Conan inside the explosive talisman cloud, or Jishe, Sasuke, Haku, Kimimaro, and the others on the ground, they all felt their hearts palpitate for no reason. What does that madman want to do? Looking at the huge Xidagarba that was more than 100 meters tall, Sasuke said in a daze, "Quickly run." Jisue didn't say anything superfluous. She pulled the injured Sasuke and activated the body flicker technique, fleeing in panic. Kimimaro and Haku on the other side also didn't hesitate and fled for their lives. At this moment, the huge Xidagarba that was 100 meters tall swelled up again. In the end, it swelled into a comical ball and then suddenly exploded. Rumble in an instant, the huge explosion engulfed everything in my village. Countless villagers dragged their families and rushed to the streets, evacuating under the command of the Mai ninjas. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble, and the surrounding houses began to sway visibly. The electric poles and lights along the street began to sway. What happened? Is it an earthquake? The villagers of Mai who fell to the ground were at a loss. On the other side of the village, Jiraiya, who was instructing Naruto and Fu about various things, looked towards the direction of the tremor and suddenly realized something. On the roof of the Naruto building, 3 generations of Naruto, 3 generations of Tsuchikage, 4 generations of Liang, 4 generations of Kazekage, and other high-level ninja villages all looked towards the direction of the tremor. Like the villagers who were at a loss, the Kages were also full of doubts. They didn't know what was happening in the distance. Chapter 1077. After a long while, the sudden violent tremors gradually slowed down, and the uneasiness of the villagers completely exploded at this moment. Hoarse shouts, fearful discussions, and the ignorant cries of the children filled the streets and alleys, causing the entire village to fall into great chaos. On the roof of the Naruto building, the Kage looked at each other. They knew that the direction of the tremor was the direction of the Akatsuki organization, but they didn't know what happened there. It must be known that this kind of movement is not something an ordinary ninja can make. Even the Kage present would find it difficult to make such a huge movement with their own strength. Whoosh! At this time, a Mai Umbu arrived on the roof of the Naruto building and reported to 3 generations of Naruto. The intelligence team has confirmed that the earthquake was caused by the battle between Amatsukumi and Akatsuki. As for further information, they are still confirming it. Listening to the Umbu's report, 3 generations of Tsuchikage's face became strange. Is it C5? Konoha sent a team, disguised as Amatsukumi, to slow down Akatsuki's offensive. Kuroto naturally knew about it. If he didn't agree, Dedail wouldn't have joined the team, So he knew that the Amitsukami in the Umbu's report wasn't the real Amitsukami, but Dedale's team. 4 generations of Kazekage heard the whisper of 3 generations of Tsuchikage and asked, "What is C5?" 3 generations of Tsuchikage solemnly explained, "C5 fireworks is a ninjutsu recently developed by Dedale. It is still in the experimental stage. According to Dedale, it is very powerful. It can destroy a city in one go. It is an art that even the Manjikyu Sharingan's Susanoo can't resist." 3 generations of Tsuchikage paused and said, "But C5 is Dedale's strongest technique. He won't use it easily unless he is in a desperate situation." 3 generations of Naruto looked into the distance and said, "It seems that Akatsuki is really going to fight this time." In the forest, the huge air wave generated by the explosion was like a torrent bursting through a dam, and the emerald green on the ground was quickly engulfed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Almost every second, every breath, a large area of the forest would completely vanish, turning into ravines and ruins in a mess. Cough, cough. In the smoke that covered the sky, Sasuke climbed out of the mud pit while coughing violently. Kuroto felt as if his body was falling apart. There was not a single part of his body that didn't hurt. Coupled with the faint tingling pain coming from the Manjikyu Sharingan, Kuroto couldn't even concentrate on thinking. At this time, Jisue reached out and pulled Sasuke. "Are you alright?" Sasuke looked at Shisui with his blurry vision and found that Shisui's current situation was not much better. The black cloak on his body was in a mess, and he was in an extremely sorry state. There were obvious injuries on his shoulders and legs, and the blood was very eye-catching. Sasuke, who was still a little confused, murmured, What happened?" Kimimaro, who also crawled out of the mud pit, replied coldly, "It's Dedale." Sasuke immediately recalled the scene just now and said angrily, "Damn, that madman Dedale didn't warn us at all. Does he want to kill us?" Jisue looked tired. Dedale's C5 firework was a combination of a direct explosion and a miniature bomb. At the moment of detonation, the miniature bomb contained in it quickly spread under the impact of the shockwave. It could be said that in that instant, all living things within a 10-mile radius of the detonation area were annihilated by the miniature bombs. Shisui even saw with his own eyes an elk that was fleeing with him turn into ashes in front of him. If he hadn't reacted fast enough and escaped a distance before Dedale detonated the C5 firework, then he decisively used the Susanoo to protect himself, Sasuke, and Kimimaro. Otherwise, the 3 of them would have been annihilated by the miniature bomb like the elk. In fact, in the explosion just now, Jisui's Susanoo almost couldn't resist it. Thanks to the artifact Yada no Kagami, he barely escaped this disaster. On the other side, Dedale, who had fallen into a pile of mud, was groaning. At this time, a figure walked out of the smoke and dust and arrived next to Dedale. This person was none other than Haku, who was holding his shoulder and staggering. Because he had also mastered the magic mirror ice crystal ability to fly in the air, he was able to escape some distance in time. Moreover, with the support of the immortal technique chakra, he hid in the ice mirror and escaped this disaster at the cost of serious injuries. He thought that Dedale, as the caster, wouldn't be in such a difficult situation. He didn't expect that Dedale, who was in the mud, would have a large area of burns and almost lose his human appearance. Seeing Dedale's large area of burns and almost lose his human appearance, he was shocked. He didn't expect that Dedale, as the caster, would end up like this. He quickly squatted down and bandaged Dedale's wounds. "How did you get so badly injured?" Dedale weakly said. "How did the explosion just now become so powerful?" Haku's forehead was full of black lines. "Shouldn't I be asking you?" Dedale embarrassedly said. Maybe I was too excited just now and didn't pay attention to the amount of chakra's amount. If I had known, I would have stayed further away before detonating it." Haku looked at Dedale in disbelief. "You didn't even know the power of the explosion and directly detonated it?" Dedale smiled. "How is it? Were you shocked by my art?" Haku was speechless. Why didn't you inform us in advance? Such an explosion, we might have died inside. Deadale didn't seem to care. Aren't you fine? Haku looked at Deadale in a daze and didn't know what to say for a while. Fortunately, Haku was here. If Kimimaro was here, then Deadale would already be a dead man. In the air, Little Man's expression was a bit unsightly. In order to resist the explosion just now, she had used up 1/3 of the detonation runes in the cloud to barely block Deadale's C5. On the side, White Jew's clone was horrified. The scene just now was really hard for him to imagine. At this time, Nagato said indifferently, "Let's continue moving forward." Little Nan nodded vigorously. "Before Otsutsuki Samurai appears, I will clear all the obstacles for you." In an instant, the cloud of detonation runes that covered the sky moved again and advanced in the direction of my village. At the same time, on the ground, apart from Hungry Ghost Path Chillabai and Animal Path, Yujito Ni, who was hiding in the body of the psychic beast, the other paths that were seriously injured in the explosion entered the mouth of the King of Hell summoned by the Naraka path. After a while, they walked out with a brand new look. I'm asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 1078. Because Deadale's C5 fireworks had wiped out almost all of the white Zetsu's doppelgangers on the ground, and Conan was worried that Amitsukami might have other ambushes, so the speed of the detonation talisman cloud in the air slowed down a lot. When the detonation talisman cloud appeared outside of my village, it was already more than 4 hours later. Logically speaking, such a long time should be enough for Mai to evacuate hundreds of thousands of villagers. But because of the previous earthquake, the evacuation work was not smooth, so when the Akatsuki organization arrived, tens of thousands of villagers were forced to stay in the village. As a last resort, Itachi, who was disguised as Hyojin, had to lead the My Ninja army to the front line. How could we resist this? Damn it, damn Akatsuki. Facing the detonation talisman cloud in front of them, the My Ninjas were shocked and angry. Ordinary ninjas had no way to deal with such a situation, let alone ordinary ninjas. Even the Jonin ninjas felt a deep sense of helplessness in the face of such a situation. At this time, Shikaka said to Itachi, who was disguised as Hyojin, "Go Dame, there is news from the communication team. The evacuation of the villagers still needs an hour." Itachi's expression was solemn. An hour? Shikaka looked at the detonation talisman cloud in the distance and analyzed. We must consume the enemy's detonation talisman as much as possible to create an opportunity for 3 generations and the other Kage to launch a surprise attack. Itachi looked at the My Ninjas around him, but without waiting for Itachi to finish his words, Shikaka said, "Kuroto, this is a ninja war. Casualties are inevitable." At this moment, Itachi found that he was a little shaken. He looked at the detonation talisman cloud in the distance and said, "Senpai, can I really bear the burden of Naruto? When will you come back?" In the detonation talisman cloud, seeing the dense number of My Ninjas on the ground in the distance, Conan raised his hands. In an instant, countless detonation talismans flew out from the cloud of detonation talismans like fluttering butterflies and then spun in the air above the battlefield, forming a vortex that gradually evolved into a dark tornado. 1, 2, 3. After a while, 3, completely formed by the detonation talismans, raged on the battlefield. Almost at the same time, on the side of the Konoha shinobi, hundreds of Konoha fire release ninjas jumped out of the crowd, and at the same time, they used hand seals, fire release, fire bullet. Then, dozens of My Ninjas shouted at the same time, wind release, great breakthrough, rumble. In an instant, 3 tornadoes composed of detonation talismans fiercely collided with the large-scale fire and wind compound ninjutsu of the Konoha shinobi. The thunderous explosion spread in all directions, and the whole sky was illuminated by the explosion and the fire of ninjutsu. On the roof of the Naruto building, under the red sky, 3 generations Naruto said to the other Kage, "Everyone, this battle is about the survival of the shinobi world. We can't retreat. We can only fight to the death. 4 generations laying said in a muffled voice. Well, if we lose this battle, our 5 great shinobi villages will be finished. 3 generations, Tsuchikage asked 3 generations Naruto. Has Yamai not contacted Amatsukami yet? 3 generations Naruto shook his head helplessly. In fact, he also felt very strange. In the past, Amatsukami would take action whenever Akatsuki made a move, but this time, Amatsukami didn't respond at all. Inside Obito's godly might space. Clang clang. On the 2 battlefields not far from each other, the harsh sound of metal colliding was frequently heard. Among them, Obsidian and Kakashi were engaged in a very simple battle of taijutsu. Neither of them used ninjutsu, but just fought with taijutsu. In contrast, the battle between Hyojin and Sasori on the other side was much more intense. After Hiriko was turned into a human puppet by Sasori, his Kekkei Genkai was also preserved. Now he has 5 Kekkei Genkai, Sharingan, Steel Release, Nether Release, and Mist Release, all of which are Sharingan. And because the controller is Sasori, who has an extremely rich combat experience, it makes up for the shortcoming of Hiriko, a researcher who is not good at actual combat. Therefore, although Hiriko's hard power is slightly reduced compared to the living Hiriko, but in terms of actual combat skills, tactical application, and other soft power, he has improved. Whether it is the Sharingan, Rapid Release, Steel Release, or Nether Release, all of these are Kekkei Genkai that have a strong effect on taijutsu. As soon as the fight began, Hyojin, who was controlling the water clone, felt a huge pressure. Because of this Steel Release, Hiriko's puppet doesn't need any ninjutsu, and with just its bare hands, it can easily break his steel-forged kunai, and the existence of the Hell Release greatly reduces the effect of his Ice Release and Boiling Release ninjutsu. Coupled with the high mobility of the Rapid Release, Hiriko's puppet was able to suppress him on the battlefield. While dealing with Hiriko's puppet, Hyojin secretly cursed, "Humph, this game experience is completely different." When he was controlling the Wind Clone, Suijin easily suppressed Hiriko. Hiriko's Steel Release was like a piece of paper in front of the Wind Clone's bone blades, and even Hiriko, who had the Rapid Release, couldn't match the Wind Clone in terms of speed. This time, after changing to the Water Clone, the gap immediately became apparent. Compared with the Wind Clone, the Water Clone is obviously weaker in terms of destructive power and basic physique. The only commendable thing is that the Water Clone's ability to survive is the strongest of all his clones. As long as he doesn't want to die, ordinary people really can't do anything to him. Seeing that Hiriko's puppet couldn't take down Hyojin, Sasori coldly snorted and took out 2 more scrolls and held them in his hand. Suijin, no matter how you struggle, you can't change the fact that you will soon become my collection. After saying that, the 2 scrolls in Sasori's hand shook slightly. Bang! Bang! In the 2 puffs of white smoke, 2 more puppets appeared. Like Hiriko's puppet, these 2 puppets have also been modified, and their bodies are covered with black sticks that can transmit chakra remotely. Sasori smiled at this time and said, "These 2 are also my favorite collection. They are the Patriarch of the Snow Clan and the Patriarch of the Kagaya Clan. You should also know them." The second update is here, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. It's going to be a new week soon, and the list will be updated. Please recommend and support it. In addition, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1079. Seeing Sasori take out the ice puppet and bone puppet, Hyojin wasn't surprised at all. After all, he was once chased by Sasori's ice puppet. After Sasori lost Sandaime Kazakage's puppet, he took advantage of the rebellion of the Mist Village Bloodline clan and sneaked into the Mist Village with Orochimaru, who was his partner at that time. At that time, Sasori, who was obsessed with puppet techniques, obtained the corpses of the Snow Clan's Patriarch and the Kagaya Clan's Patriarch, 2 powerful Kekkei Genkai ninjas, while Orochimaru obtained Kimimaro and Haku, 2 loyal subordinates. In comparison, Orochimaru who accompanied Sasori to the Mist Village to collect puppet materials, gain more. At this time, the corner of Sasori's mouth curled up as he urged the Ice Puppet and Bone Puppet to join the battle and besiege Suijin while saying in a mocking tone, "Don't worry, you are just the first person from Amatsuki to become part of my collection. In the future, your colleagues will accompany you and become part of my collection one by one." Facing the siege of 3 puppets, Hyojin's pressure increased greatly. But that's all. With Ice Release, Boil Release, and the secret techniques of the Ghost Lantern clan, he has an unparalleled ability to resist pressure. Coupled with his rich combat experience and superb taijutsu skills, although he was at a disadvantage on the battlefield, the situation wasn't critical. And in such a high-intensity battle, the various secret techniques of the Ghost Lantern clan and the Boil Release, Kekkei Genkai, Kekkei were put to great use. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that he was in the Kamui space, Hyojin really wanted to make good use of Sasori's excellent sparring partner to test the limits of the Water Release clone. In the battle, Hyojin glanced at the confrontation between Kakashi and Obsidian from the corner of his eye. When Obsidian's identity was revealed, the battle between them seemed to be a predestined confrontation. At this moment, both of them only had eyes for each other. But now, Obsidian had 2 Kamui. Not only could he use Susanoo, but he could also use various would-release ninjutsu and Manjiki Sharingan's Jinjutsu. Although Kakashi had mastered the Flying Thunder God technique, Purple Lightning, and so on, if it was a battle of strength, unless Obsidian went easy on him, Kakashi had a low chance of winning. And Kakashi was the key to breaking this situation. Once Kakashi lost, Hyojin might be trapped in the Kamui space. Withdrawing his gaze, Kuroda looked at the opposite Sasori and thought to himself, "What a pity, such a good sparring partner. But now I really can't care about this." With this thought in mind, Hyojin thought of a way to break this situation. Sasori's puppets were definitely more than the 3 in front of him. If he really fought them head-on, even if Hyojin could win, he would have to spend a lot of energy, and this is undoubtedly a bad plan for Hyojin, who needs to break this situation quickly. What should I do? Suddenly, a light flashed in Hyojin's mind. In fact, when he first discovered that Obsidian arranged Sasori to stay in the Kamui space, Hyojin was instinctively surprised, and now that he thought about it, that strong surprise in his subconscious at that time was not without reason. No one knows better than Hyojin that the current Akatsuki organization is actually divided into 2 factions. In this world, because of the butterfly effect of Amatsuki created by Hyojin, there are some differences between the members of Akatsuki and the original world, but the Akatsuki organization is divided into 2 factions. Among them, Konan, Hiriko, Sasori, and Kakuzu are hardcore Nagato faction. Zetsu, Shinichi, and the Mist Squad's Ghost Shark and others are Obsidian faction. Because of this, in order to weaken the strength of Nagato's faction, Obsidian did not rescue Hiriko in time, causing Hiriko to be seriously injured by Hyojin, who controlled the Wind Release clone and eventually lost control and died. But as Nagato's strength becomes stronger and stronger, and Shinichi, who was personally recruited by Obsidian, defected from the Akatsuki organization, Obsidian faction's influence in the Akatsuki organization will inevitably become weaker and weaker. This is a conclusion that can be reached without thinking about it. And Hyojin is very sure that Obsidian will never be willing to submit to Nagato, because Obsidian is not even willing to obey Uchiha Madara, who saved his life, and only wants to launch the Eye of the Moon project in his own way. Then there is a very obvious contradiction. That is, how can Obsidian let Sasori, who was obviously sent by Nagato to monitor him, understand the secret of his Gogami space? Wasn't this the same as handing over his trump card to someone else? Unless he didn't plan to let Sasori leave here alive. As long as it is done cleanly enough, the dead can't reveal the secret. And if Sasori is killed here, Obsidian can not only weaken the power of Nagato's faction, but also ensure that the secret of Gogami space will not be leaked. And at the same time as realizing this, Hyojin couldn't help but think, has the contradiction between Obsidian and Nagato reached such an irreconcilable point? Is it because Nagato's strength is too strong and out of control? Not to mention what happened between Obsidian and Nagato. At least now Hyojin has found a way to break the stalemate. He jumped out of the battle temporarily, and then said to Sasori, "Interesting, you don't think I'm the only prey, do you?" Sasori tilted his head and smiled evilly. "Isn't it?" Hyojin smiled and said, "How did Hiriko die, so you don't know?" Sasori asked, "What do you mean?" Hyojin glanced at Obsidian not far away and said in a mocking tone, "Because of that guy's existence. Windchime didn't expect to cut off Hiriko's head with one blow, but I didn't expect that guy to deliberately leave him to die." Windchime was also very surprised at the time. Sasori's face sank. "Isn't this kind of sowing discord a bit too low?" "Sowing discord?" Smiling, Hyojin said, "Aren't you sent by Nagato to monitor him? I don't know what kind of confidence you have that made you take the initiative to come here, but I'm sure of one thing, you can't leave. He will never let you leave with the secret of this place." Sasori fell silent when he heard this. With Sasori's IQ, he naturally noticed that Obsidian and Nagato were on good terms, and this time he came to help Obsidian. Conan did indeed tell him to keep an eye on Obsidian's every move. It's just that he felt that Obsidian didn't have the guts to resist Nagato, so he cooperated and entered the Shinwei space. Now that Hyojin said this, especially when Obsidian left Hiriko to die, Sasori faintly had a trace of doubt in his heart. Does he really dare to resist Nagato? Here's the first update. Please vote for me on Monday. It's just a small effort. Please support me. Thank you. Chapter 1080. In fact, after just learning the true identity of Obsidian, Sasori was both surprised and despised him. Although he did not really believe in the identity of Madara Uchiha that Obsidian claimed to be, because of the mystery of Obsidian and the weirdness of Kimi, he was somewhat afraid of Obsidian. When Obsidian's identity of Madara Uchiha was exposed by Hyojin, this fear naturally disappeared. But even so, Hyojin's words just now were like a thorn, piercing into his heart, making him doubt the intentions of Obsidian's action. The flash of hesitation in Sasori's eyes could not be hidden from Hyojin. Hyojin smiled slightly, and immediately his figure flickered and rushed to the battlefield between Kakashi and Obsidian. He did not forget to continue to shout, "If you don't believe me, we can leave here first and then fight to the death." He didn't expect that his few words could make Sasori completely change sides. What he needed was a short period of time to get rid of Sasori's entanglement. And just as he expected, Sasori did not stop him from pouncing on Obito at the first moment. Instead, after weighing the situation for a while, he controlled the 3 human puppets around him to follow behind him. It seemed like he was going to watch the fight from the sidelines. After confirming Sasori's actions, the corners of Hyojin's mouth under the mask rose slightly, and then he quickly converged his thoughts and focused his attention on Obsidian not far away. He knew very well that Sasori's hesitation would not last long. If he could not solve Obsidian quickly, then Sasori was likely to entangle him again, so there was not much time left for him to break the situation. Swish, after a few ups and downs, Hyojin flashed to the giant stone platform where Kakashi and Obsidian were fighting, and his approach was naturally noticed by Kakashi and Obsidian who were fighting. At this time, Hyojin did not hesitate at all. Without stopping, he rushed out directly from behind Kakashi, passed by Kakashi, and rushed to Obsidian. "You're courting death." Seeing Hyojin coming to disturb the situation, Obsidian's face was ferocious. In an instant, a cyan phantom was projected from his body, and then in an instant, from the most basic skeleton state, it changed into a nearly complete state with heavy armor. And after Obsidian Science Assassin appeared, he did not hesitate at all, and punched fiercely at Hyojin. Crash! Under the blow, Hyojin, who did not dodge, was instantly smashed and turned into a pool of water. Seeing this, Obsidian's pupils shrank suddenly, and he subconsciously felt a bad feeling, and his hands quickly formed a seal. On the other side, Hyojin, who had turned into a pool of water, easily drilled into the obsidian's system from the gap in the ground, and then suddenly flashed and rushed to obsidian. At this time, obsidian had completed the seal, and seeing Hyogen in the state of liquid rushing to him, he immediately puffed up his mouth and shouted, "Fire release! Great fireball technique!" Boom! A huge fireball with a high-temperature shot towards Hyogen in the state of liquid. In an instant, Hyogen's liquid body quickly froze and turned into a piece of ice, resisting Obsidian's great fireball technique, and then liquefied again, jumped, and wrapped around Obsidian's body, wrapping Obsidian up. Obsidian panicked. As long as it is not a complete system, the defense is not absolute. Not to mention Obsidian, when Madara Uchiha fought against the 5 Kage in the original space and time, he also suffered a big loss because of this. If he hadn't been in the impure earth body at that time, he would have been defeated. And Obsidian's experience in using Susu is obviously not as good as Uchiha Madara, and he did not expect Hyogen to be so determined. However, Hyogen's side is not good either. It is actually very stupid to resist the fire release ninjutsu in the form of liquid. Even if he temporarily used ice release, it only slightly reduced the consumption of chakra. Soon, Obsidian, who was wrapped by Hyogen in the state of liquid, suppressed the panic in his heart and put his hands together and grinned. "Do you think you can win by sneaking into swoosh?" In an instant, Obsidian launched the wood release cutting technique on himself, and countless branches pierced out of his body and into the body of Hyogen in the state of liquid. The branches of this cutting technique can absorb the chakra of the target and then grow wildly, so once hit by this technique, the internal organs of the target will be quickly twisted. On the surface, it looks like he was just stabbed by a wooden stake, and it doesn't seem serious, but in fact, the internal organs have been completely destroyed. In the original time and space, Ningxi died under this seemingly ordinary ninjutsu. Although Hyogen in the state of liquid has no physical body, he still has chakra, so after being pierced by these branches, the chakra in his body quickly disappeared. And Hyogen was not idle. He directly used ice release in his body and accurately pierced the 2-3 Tomo Sharingan transplanted on the back of Obsidian. In this way, if Obsidian has already used Izanagi, then he will inevitably lose one of the 3 Tomo Sharingan. But if he hasn't used it yet, then the 2-3 Tomo Sharingan on his back will be completely destroyed. If he wants to use Izanagi again, then he must consume the Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye socket. The confrontation between the two sides was completed in an instant. Obsidian didn't expect that Hyogen's target was the 2-3 Tomo Sharingan on his back, because he didn't instinctively feel the danger, so he didn't use Izanagi in advance, and when he reacted, the 2-3 Tomo Sharingan used to use Izanagi on his back had been completely destroyed by Hyogen. Hyogen also didn't expect that Obsidian's reaction would be so fast, and instantly used the cutting technique that can restrain him the most. The chakra in his body has been lost a lot, and he can't even maintain his liquid form. At this time, Obsidian, who sensed Hyogen's weakness, smiled coldly. "Damn guy, go to hell." After saying that, Obsidian once again made a hand seal, ready to use fire release ninjutsu to give Hyogen the final blow and completely evaporate the liquid state of Hyogen. Whoosh! Suddenly, Kakashi flashed into Susanoo, and the Chidori in his hand instantly penetrated Hyogen, who was wrapped around Obsidian, and then stabbed Obsidian. Obsidian was stunned for a moment, and then with a puff sound, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and wondered, "How did you come in?" As soon as the words came out, Obsidian recalled the scene when Hyogen and Kakashi first rushed over, and suddenly realized that at that moment, Kakashi left a Flying Thunder God Jutsu on Hyogen's body, and then used this Flying Thunder God Jutsu to smoothly sneak into his Susanoo. The second chapter is here, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. In addition, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone. The second chapter is here, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. In addition, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 1081. Kakashi's dazzling purple electric thousand birds pierced through Hyojin's liquefied body and pierced into Obsidian's chest. Then his arm pierced through the chest and pierced through the entangled Obsidian and Hyojin. Whether it was the movement or the technique, it was as if the scene where he killed Noera Lin was replayed. In an instant, the purple electric thousand birds spread to Obsidian and Hyojin's bodies. Under such a blow, even a ninja at the level of Hyojin and Obsidian couldn't bear it. Moreover, the lightning release was the bane of the Ghost Lantern clan's water transformation technique, not to mention the fact that Kakashi was using the purple electric thousand birds that had undergone a change in nature. Therefore, in an instant, the liquefied Hyojin's whole body was paralyzed. He was separated from Obsidian's body and fell to the ground, passively withdrawing from the liquefied state. Puff! At the same time, Obsidian spat out a mouthful of blood and pain. However, there wasn't much anger on his face. He even curled his lips and said, "Kakashi, I didn't expect you to be so straightforward." Panting heavily, Kakashi pulled out the arm that pierced through Obsidian's chest and staggered 2 steps back with a dull expression on his face. The masked man squatted down and looked at his pierced chest. He said in an indescribable tone, as if he was relieved, but also as if he was determined, "The bond between us is finally broken." Kakashi first looked at his blood-stained arm, and then slowly shifted his gaze to Obsidian's chest that was pierced by his purple electric thousand birds. He was lost in thought. Cough, cough, accompanied by a violent coughing of blood. The green sinew that enveloped the 3 of them gradually dissipated. However, Obsidian didn't care at all. He pointed at his bleeding chest and said, "Do you see it? Kakashi, this is my heart. When Lin died, it no longer existed." Hyojin, who was paralyzed on the ground, was also slightly distracted. When they were in the ninja school, Lin's relationship with him was actually quite good. In other words, Lin didn't mind being friends with him, who was one of the weakest ninjas. The absent-minded Kakashi shook his head. "Lin doesn't want to see you like this." "Is that so?" Pausing for a moment, Obsidian clutched his chest and said with difficulty, "Thank you, Kakashi. You've helped me cut off the last shackles between me and this world." After saying this, Obsidian's temperament changed again. It was a kind of loneliness from the inside out. Almost at the same time, Hyojin's eyes turned cold. At this moment, he could clearly feel that Obsidian's eye powers had become much stronger. It was even resonating with the lonely godly might dimension. The law that the more extreme the thoughts of the Uchiha people are, the stronger the eye powers are, was once again reflected. Kakashi also seemed to feel something. He opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. Hyojin was speechless and said, "Hey, didn't I already tell you to aim at the head?" In the scroll given to Kakashi before, Hyojin has already mentioned the forbidden technique, Izanagi, that can distort fate, so he especially emphasized that the man GQ Sharingan itself is the biggest weakness of Obsidian. If he aimed at the head, even if he can't kill Obsidian in one shot, he can at least force Obsidian to use Izanagi to save his life. Without waiting for Kakashi to answer, Obsidian smiled and said, "Yes, Kakashi, you should have aimed at the head." As he spoke, his figure began to distort. Hyojin was shocked and said, "Not good. He's going to escape." Once Obsidian leaves the Godly Might dimension and cut off the connection between the Godly Might dimension and the Shinobi world, then Hyojin and Kakashi are equivalent to being locked here. Kakashi, who was also aware of this, came to Hyojin's side and then took advantage of the time when Obsidian used Godly Might to activate Flying Thunder God technique and escape from Obsidian's Godly Might dimension together with Hyojin. Whoosh! After flashing to the muddy battlefield on the side of the Shinobi world, Hyojin and Kakashi immediately became alert and searched for Obsidian's figure. However, on the empty battlefield, there are only corpses everywhere and the pungent smell of blood. There is no sign of Obsidian at all. Humph! Kuroto spat lightly and then sat cross-legged on the ground to recover. His water and oil clone, which had just been left on the battlefield, also came to his side in a few leaps and stood up. There is no doubt that Obsidian used Godly Might not to escape from the Godly Might dimension, but to deliberately make Kakashi and Hyojin make a mistake and take the initiative to withdraw from the godly might dimension. And this trick is basically impossible for Kakashi and Hyojin to break out of the godly might dimension. Because if the two of them don't fall for the trick and take the initiative to come out, Obsidian can really leave the godly might dimension and lock them in the godly might dimension. At this time, Hyojin glanced at Kakashi and asked, "Why didn't you aim at the head?" He didn't think that he could successfully kill Obsidian in one shot, but as long as Kakashi fully cooperates with him, then Obsidian will lose at least one man GQ Sharingan this time. Because he had already destroyed the 2-3 Tomo Sharingan on Obsidian's back at the cost of his own heavy injuries. As long as Kakashi aimed at the head, Obsidian would have to use Izanagi to protect himself, and at that time, Obsidian only had 2-man GQ Sharingan left. Whether it is the long-range godly might that destroyed the left eye or the close-range godly might of the right eye, both greatly weaken Obsidian, and it is unknown whether Obsidian can still use Susanoo with only 1-man GQ Sharingan left. In the face of Hyojin's questioning, Kakashi was silent for a while and said, "I can be sure that my Chidori hit his heart. In this case, if he doesn't use Izanagi, he will never survive." Hyojin shook his head. Chidori pierced the heart, and it is still the purple lightning Chidori that has changed its nature. If it is an ordinary person, they will naturally die, but Obsidian is different. Hyojin remembers that after Obsidian's chest was pierced by Kakashi in the original space and time, he was severely cut by Yondaime Naruto, which made his injury worse. But even so, Obsidian broke free from the control of Uchiha Madara and forcibly took the Jubi into his body, and became a Jubi's Jinchuriki with a seriously injured body. It can be seen how terrible Obsidian's resistance is. Just a purple lightning Chidori may not be able to force Obsidian to consume a man GQ Sharingan to use Izanagi. But Hyojin didn't say anything more because he knew that in the final analysis, Kakashi couldn't kill his best friend. In the godly might space, Obsidian was lying in a pool of blood, and he seemed to be dead. Sasori walked over at this time and grinned. "I thought it was a difficult character. I didn't expect him to be killed so easily. It's ridiculous." With that, Sasori squatted beside Obsidian and reached out to the Obsidian's eye socket. Is this pair of man GQ Sharingan the key to freely enter and exit this different space? The first update is here, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. Chapter 1082. Sasori was indeed very surprised by Obsidian's instant defeat. He never expected that Obsidian would be defeated so quickly and so miserably in the face of the joint forces of Amatsukami and Kakashi. But because everything happened in front of his eyes, he didn't doubt anything after witnessing the whole process. Because as a master of human puppet transformation, he knows better than anyone that once a normal person's heart is injured, even if there is timely treatment, it may not be able to be saved, not to mention Obsidian's entire chest was completely penetrated by ninjutsu. And compared to Obsidian's life and death, at this time, he is undoubtedly more interested in Obsidian's pair of Manjikyu Sharingan that can connect the shinobi world and the Kamui space. In recent decades, although there have been many Manjikyu Sharingan in the shinobi world, but there are not many people who really have the opportunity to study Manjikyu Sharingan, such as Orochimaru, Hiriko, and Shino. All of them are extremely obsessed with Uchiha's Manjikyu Sharingan, but they can't get their hands on it. Sasori and Orochimaru are the same kind of people. When a pair of Manjikyu Sharingan. Moreover, it is Obsidian's Manjikyu Sharingan that is extremely magical even in the eyes of all Manjikyu Sharingan. Sasori's curiosity surpassed everything. So, driven by curiosity, Sasori didn't check Obsidian's body too much. He reached out and touched Obsidian's eye sockets. After wiping Obsidian's eyelids, Sasori looked at the Scarlet Manjikyu Sharingan and muttered to himself, "Is this the Manjikyu Sharingan?" Before his voice fell, Sasori was shocked to find that Obsidian's Manjikyu Sharingan was spinning. In an instant, he felt his consciousness become sluggish, and everything around him became blurry. Jinjutsu? He's not dead. When the last thought flashed through his mind, Sasori's consciousness fell into the abyss. Cough! Obsidian coughed violently as he propped himself up. He knew very well that with his current physical state, he was not Scorpion's opponent at all, so he faked his death to make Scorpion careless, and then subdued Scorpion with an illusion. Obsidian lowered his head and glanced at the wound on his chest. He sneered, "It's all thanks to Kakashi. If it were not for the frightening wound on his chest, Sasori would not have fallen for it with his experience." Moreover, this wound not only helped Obsidian deceive Sasori, but also helped Obsidian remove a literal hidden danger. Uchiha Madara's trust in Obsidian is actually limited. Therefore, Uchiha Madara secretly left a curse mark on Obsidian's heart as the last trump card to restrain Obsidian. Obsidian was also aware of this, but he could not remove the curse mark on his heart by himself, so he had been planning to use the enemy's hand to remove the curse mark left on his heart before the final implementation of the backup plan. It's just that even he didn't expect that Kakashi would fulfill his wish. So he said that Kakashi cut off all the fetters for him, not only referring to the fetters between him and Kakashi, but also implying the fetters between him and Uchiha Madara. Bang! At this moment, a white Zetsu clone popped out of the ground and threw the sword of fetters that Hyojin had hidden in Obsidian's kingly space in front of Obsidian and said, "I finally found it. It should have been left here by Kirin before." It seems that this attack was prepared for a long time. What a terrible opponent. Looking at Kakashi's sword of fetters on the ground, the already weak Obsidian's face became paler. The strength of Amatsukami and the cunning of the members of Amatsukami made him feel very uneasy. White Zetsu clone glanced at Sasori, who had been controlled by Jinjutsu, and the three puppets standing beside Sasori, and said, "It seems that everything went well." Obsidian nodded. As Hyojin had speculated before, when he put Sasori in the Kinui space, he had already made up his mind to deal with Sasori. Of course, he did this not simply to kill Sasori and weaken the strength of Nagato's party, but to use Sasori to complete the most critical part of his backup plan. In other words, using Genjutsu to control Sasori was part of his whole plan. Seeing that the wound on Obsidian's chest was still bleeding, White Zetsu clone said, "Let's begin." "Okay." Obsidian responded and then reached out to grab White Zetsu clone in front of him. White Zetsu clone, who was grabbed by Obsidian, seemed to melt and flow into Obsidian's body, filling the wound on Obsidian's chest little by little. In an instant, Obsidian's painful howl echoed in the lonely Kamui space. Although this kind of fusion of flesh and blood can quickly recover from injuries because the cells of the whole body are constantly torn and divided, the pain is also unimaginable. And just when Obsidian almost lost consciousness from the pain, an inconspicuous black attached to White Zetsu clone also flowed into Obsidian's body along with White Zetsu clone in the ninja world. After a short rest, Hyojin recovered from the numbness. This battle made him realize how terrifying his water release clone's ability to survive was. Whether it was the attack of Susanoo, or the attack of fire release, or wood release, it basically couldn't kill him. Even if he was hit by the most restrained thunder release, he would only be paralyzed all over and couldn't really deal a fatal blow to him. It's just that at the same time, the lack of attack power of the water release clone was also revealed in this battle. It's fine against ordinary ninjas, but once it faces a powerful ninja, it must be unconventional to find a chance to win. At this time, Kakashi glanced in the direction of the mist village in the distance and wondered, "Hey, the battle over there seems to have stopped. Did the mist fall, or did the Akatsuki organization retreat?" GA. Just as Hyojin was about to rush to the mist village to have a look, a ninja crow passed through the fog and landed on his shoulder. Seeing this, Kakashi's eyes flashed. As Naruto agent, he naturally knows that ninjas who raise ninja crows are extremely rare in the ninja world, and the most famous one is undoubtedly the Uchiha clan in the village. Hyojin didn't care about Kakashi's reaction, but quickly took off the communication scroll on the ninja crow's leg, opened it, and suddenly frowned. Mai was attacked by the Akatsuki organization. What? Kakashi was taken aback. Hyojin didn't panic too much. The Akatsuki organization's attack on Mai has always been in his plan. He didn't use the Yin release because he was guarding against this move of the Akatsuki organization. After pondering for a moment, he said, "First go to confirm the situation in the Mist Village, and then go to rescue Mai." Kakashi nodded. Because he has mastered the Flying Thunder God technique, it doesn't take too much time for Kakashi to return to Mai. Therefore, it's very necessary to confirm the situation in the Mist Village that is close at hand. Here's the second update, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Also, thank you to the students who gave me gifts today. Thank you so much. Chapter 1083. Outside the Mai Village. Because of the huge cloud of detonation talismans, thousands of Mai ninjas were forced to line up in a long line, and the battlefield was stretched almost infinitely to both sides. In this long and narrow battlefield, the air was filled with a strong, pungent smell of gunpowder, and the ground was full of potholes caused by explosions, as well as the Mai ninjas scattered all over the place. The sound of explosions, shouts, and the groans of the wounded on the ground intertwined, making the battlefield extremely noisy. Under the desperate resistance of thousands of Mai ninjas, the advancement of the detonation talismans was stopped. The cloud of detonation talismans that covered the sky before, and almost endless, was consumed by the Mai ninja army to only 1/10 of its original size. The battle has entered the climax, and Itachi, disguised as Hyojin, led the elite ninjas of the Mai ninja army to fight against Conan, who was controlling the detonation talismans. Even if the hundreds of billions of detonation talismans in the air are ignored, Conan's strength is still at the Kage level, and coupled with her rare flying ability, she is one of the most difficult to deal with among all the Kage level strong people. If you count the detonation talismans in the sky, Conan can almost sweep the majority of the Kage level strong people in a one-on-one fight. In the original timeline, Obsidian used the two techniques of Kinui and Izanagi one after another to barely survive the attack of Conan's detonation talismans, and finally killed Conan at the cost of serious injuries. If it was any other Kage-level strong people who don't understand space-time ninjutsu, it is difficult to imagine who could withstand the wave of detonation talismans that Conan launched. However, after the previous obstruction of the Jishue squad, and the resistance of my ninja army led by Itachi, Conan was almost at the end of her flight and was unable to move forward anymore. At this time, Nagato and the detonation talismans did not entangle with the my ninja army led by Itachi, but directly crossed the narrow battlefield and went straight in the direction of the my village. Swish, 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 in a burst of wind, the 3 generations of Naruto holding the Vajra wishful staff, the 4 generations of Lei Ying wearing the metal arm guard, the 3 generations of Tsuchikage floating in the air, the 4 generations of Kazekage surrounded by golden sand, and Tsunade Haim, one of the Sannin, blocked Nagato's way, slamming the Vajra wishful staff in his hand on the ground. 3 generations Naruto said, "Nagato, I will never let you destroy Mai again." Glancing at the 5 people in front of him, Nagato said indifferently, "As long as you hand over the 9 tails human Jinchuriki and the 7 tails human Jinchuriki, I can spare you." 4 generations of Lei Ying suddenly became furious. "Hand over Chilabai and Yujito ni." Tsunade said, "Nagato, if it weren't for us saving you back then, I'm afraid that you orphans would have died in the war. Is this how you repay our kindness?" Nagato shifted his gaze to Tsunade, and his tone gradually became cold. "You 5 great ninja villages are the real root cause of the war. It is you who started one war after another, destroying our lives. You are the initiator of all this. Kindness, in the midst of monstrous crimes, just because of your occasional mercy, we, who have been destroyed by you, should be grateful." Tsunade's face sank. "War is not our wish." 3 generations of Tsuchikage in the air said, "As long as your Akatsuki organization stops committing crimes, peace will come immediately. This kind of fragile peace is meaningless." After a pause, Nagato still said indifferently, "Only when I become a true kami, ban all villages, and bring the fear of war to all countries, can the world of shinobi obtain true peace." 3 generations of Naruto shook his head. "Fear cannot be exchanged for peace." Nagato said faintly, "That's just because there is a lack of pain in fear. When I decorate fear with pain and let you, the initiators of the war, taste the pain of losing your family, being homeless and starving, you will understand how precious peace is." 3 generations of Naruto sighed with emotion. "Our 5 great ninja villages have indeed done a lot of stupid things, but by doing this, aren't you repeating our previous path? Of course it's different. I am a kami. I will not fail like you." With that said, Nagato raised his hands. In an instant, the 6 paths of pain, headed by Tendo, jumped out from behind Kuroto, crossed the battlefield in just a few leaps, and rushed into my village not far away. Chillabai, Yujito ni. Seeing Nagato's new 6 paths of pain, 4 generations of Laying was surprised and subconsciously shouted. Like 4 generations of Laying, 3 generations of Tsuchikage also recognized the 4-tailed Jinchuriki Lao Z and the 5-tailed Jinchuriki Han wearing the Akatsuki red cloud suit. 3 generations of Naruto could only watch as the 6 paths of pain rushed into the village, because Nagato was in front of them. The 5 of them had a hard time dealing with Nagato, so they couldn't spare any manpower to intercept the 6 paths of pain. After controlling the 6 paths of pain to attack my village, Nagato said coldly, "You are not my opponent. Let Otsutsuki Samurai come out. The future of the world of shinobi is between us." The leader of Amatsukami is really Otsutsuki Samurai. For a time, this thought flashed in the minds of several Kages at the same time. My village. With the strong attack of the 6 paths of pain, a war suddenly broke out in the village where the villagers were still being evacuated. Near the guest house, the animal path Yujito Ni pressed her hands on the ground and shouted, "Psychic Jutsu!" Bang, bang, bang. In a burst of white smoke, 4 or 5 large psychic beasts, including the previous chameleon and hellhound, suddenly appeared on the street of my village. In the guest house, Cloud Village's Darui, Sammy, Shi, Rock Village's Kuroto, Akatsuki, Sand Crypsis' Teiju, Kankuro, Zoa, Sound Village's Yugo, and other ninjas who participated in the Chunin exam formed their own formation and fought with the animal path Yujito Ni and her psychic beasts. On the field of the ninja school, the Azura Han asked my Umbu in his hand, "Tell me, where are the 9 tails' Jinchuriki and the 7 tails Jinchuriki?" The Umbu, who was strangled, said, "I'm a my ninja. Don't even think about getting any information from me." With a crack sound, the Azura Han crushed the Umbu's neck and threw the Umbu's body to the side. Swoosh, swoosh. At this time, Guy led his team to the field. Seeing my Umbu corpses around the Azura Han, Guy immediately ordered Ningxi, Xiaoli, and Tian Tian, "I'll be the main attacker. You guys cover me." "Yes." Ningxi, Xiaoli, and Tian Tian answered in unison, then followed Guy and pounced on the Azura Han. I'm asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 1084. On the main road leading to the Naruto building, Asuma, Earthworm, Kurinai, Uchiha Police Forces Uchiha Shinji, and a large number of Umbu surrounded Old Purple, who was slowly walking towards them. Asuma smiled and said, "Earthworm, I didn't expect that we would fight side by side one day. Fate is really unpredictable." Earthworm nodded. Earthworm, who is also one of the 12 guardians like Asuma, rushed to support my village on behalf of the hidden daimyo of the Land of Fire when I entered a state of readiness for war. At this time, Uchiha Shinji, who was in the police force, shouted at Old Purple, "If you don't stop, I won't be polite to you." Asuma, who knew more inside information, said to the crowd, "Do it. He has probably been made into 6 paths of pain by the Akatsuki organization. He is no longer the Rock Village's Jinchuriki." After listening to Asuma's words, everyone was no longer polite, and immediately launched an attack inside the Hyuga clan. Looking at the clansmen in a hurry in front of him, as the patriarch, Hayashi's face sank and asked the attendant beside him, "Is there any news from the fifth Sama?" The attendant shook his head and said, "The fifth Sama is still fighting with the Akatsuki organization outside the village. There is no news yet." At this moment, a mournful cry came from not far away. Hayashi's eyes turned cold, and immediately activated Byakugan to look over, and found that Yu Gao of the human realm was killing the Hyuga clansmen who were guarding the gate of the clan, so he rushed over. Halfway, Hayashi met up with Richa, who was also rushing to the gate of the clan, and asked, "How many enemies have sneaked into the village?" Richa shook his head and said, "There is no definite news from the intelligence team, but from the movements, there should be a lot of infiltrators, or they are very strong." Hayashi sighed. "I'm afraid this is going to be a tough battle. As a member of the Naruto clan, the Hyuga clan can't evacuate first like the other clans. Just like the Senju clan in the past, they can only resist." Rumble, as Tendo raised his hand, more than a dozen of my ninjas, along with an entire block, were sent flying. At this time, Jiraiya, who had entered the Sage mode with Fukasaku and Shima, hurried over and landed on the ruins. Casting a glance at Jiraiya, the will of the heavens said, "Give up on your meaningless resistance." Jiraiya did not waste his breath to persuade Nagato as he did in the past, because he knew that it was meaningless to argue now. Therefore, he said with a firm gaze while forming a seal, "Even if I have to pay with my life, I will correct the mistake I have made." After saying that, Jiraiya's figure sank. Immortal art, thousand hairy needles. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, Jiraiya's hair, which was activated by the energy of nature, became as hard as steel and shot towards Tendo in the distance like a real thousand hairy needles. Tendo gently raised his hand. "Shinra Tensei." Boom! All the hairy needles, together with Jiraiya, were repelled by the repulsive force of Shinra Tensei. When the smoke and dust dissipated, Tendo said to Jiraiya, who fell in the ruins, "Jiraiya, Sensei, hand over the 9 tails' Jinchuriki and the 7 tails' Jinchuriki." As soon as Tendo's voice fell, Jiraiya, who fell in the ruins, turned into white smoke. At the same time, the ground under Tendo's feet cracked, and Jiraiya sprang out of the crack. Immortal art, Rasengan. Tendo was instantly hit by Jiraiya's Rasengan and flew out. But soon, Tendo slowly got up and said in a calm tone, "It's meaningless to rebel against God." Jiraiya shook his head. "Nagato, we are just mortals. In my hospital, who's going to save me? I'm bleeding. Mom, it hurts." With the influx of a large number of injured people, my hospital immediately became the busiest and most chaotic area in the whole village. Voices of urging, wailing, and cursing came one after another, making everyone's emotions on the verge of collapse. As a medical ninja, Kuroto still stood on the front line. After finishing the treatment of a villager, she wiped the fine sweat on her forehead and shouted, "Next!" Shien, who was guarding on the side, came up at this time. "Ing-sama, we can't delay any longer. Naruto-sama said that you must move immediately." Yui shook her head. "I can't go." She didn't want to disobey Hyojin's order, but looking at the scene of the hospital in front of her, even the corridor was full of injured people, it was really difficult for her to make up her mind to escape. Boom! Suddenly, there was an explosion outside, and the glass in the hospital was shattered by the explosion. Shien immediately pulled out her sword and was on guard. As Hyojin's shadow guard, she only had one task, and that was to protect Kuroto's safety at all costs. Gale, who was guarding outside my hospital, rushed in and said, "Members of the Akatsuki are coming here, and they are very strong. They killed 3 or 4 Umbu outside in one move. If we don't leave now, it will be too late." Before Yui could answer, there was a loud rumble, and the whole hospital shook. Then a figure fell from the sky, destroyed the roof of the hospital, and landed steadily in the hospital hall. In the hospital, Mute led Sakura, Ino, and Yui, Shien, and Gale rushed to the hall in a hurry. They found that the uninvited guest who fell from the sky was none other than the original Cloud, Yakuza's Hachibi's Jinchuriki, wearing the Akatsuki's red cloud suit. Looking at the black stick embedded in Kialabai's face, Mute and Yui, who were Tsunade's disciples, realized something. Because he had collected half of the black stick on the battlefield, Mai was not ignorant of the black stick. He knew that this black stick was the product of the Rinnegan, and it could be used as a terminal to transmit and receive chakra. At this time, Kialabai said coldly, "Hand over the 9 tails' Jinchuriki and the 7 tails' Jinchuriki, or all of you will die." Whoosh! Almost as soon as Chilabai from the Hungry Ghost Dao opened his mouth, Shien and Gale launched a sneak attack from both sides. However, the Hungry Ghost Realm Chilabai did not dodge. Instead, he stretched out his octopus-like tails and whipped them fiercely, sending Shien and Gale flying. Mute and Yui hurriedly blocked in front of Kialabai and shouted at Sakura, Ino, Ziyuin, and the others behind them, "You guys leave here quickly." Hungry Ghost Realm Chilabai looked at Mute and Bell. He didn't waste any time and stretched out his octopus tail. Just as the Hungry Ghost Realm's Chilabai's octopus tail was about to wrap around Mute and Bell, a dark green Susanoo descended from the sky and abruptly cut off the octopus tail that was about to wrap around Mute and Bell. There is no doubt that the person who came was none other than Uchiha Shinichi. Seeing that it was Uchiha Shinichi, Kialabai said lightly, "Shinichi, are you going to stop me? I can let bygones be bygones for your previous betrayal, but this opportunity only comes once." Hearing that Kialabai actually recruited Uchiha Shinichi, Mute, Yui, and even Shien, who fell to the ground and was seriously injured, Gale became nervous. Shinichi, who was shrouded by the Susanoo, hurriedly turned around and looked at Yui. Seeing that Yui was safe and sound, he immediately breathed a long sigh of relief and said to Kialabai, "Idiot, the shinobi world was almost destroyed by you. Here's the second update, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Also, thank you to all the students who tipped today." Chapter 1085. When the Hungry Ghost Realm's Chilabai defeated the guard around the hospital in a sweeping manner and instantly defeated Shien and Gale, who were members of the Shadow Guard, Xiao Ying and Ino had a horrified expression on their faces. They fell to the ground powerlessly, and their hearts were filled with despair. The strength of the other party is far beyond their imagination, making them lose the courage to resist. On the side, Ren was also shocked and scared, tightly holding the transparent bell in her hand. Her mother has repeatedly told her not to remove the seal on the bell before she can fully control the power of the Miko, because once the power of the Miko goes out of control, the consequences will be unimaginable. So she was at a loss and didn't know what to do. And just when everyone fell into fear and despair, no one expected that the kaleidoscope of the Uchiha clan would appear in time. Immediately afterward, the recruitment of Uchiha Shinichi made everyone who just had a glimmer of hope fall into uneasiness. Whether it was the medical ninjas, such as Mute, or the patients, all of them turned their eyes to Uchiha Shinichi, nervously waiting for Uchiha Shinichi's decision. At this moment, the lives of everyone in the hospital are in the hands of Uchiha Shinichi. However, the reaction of Uchiha Shinichi was beyond everyone's expectations. Not only did he not care about the Akatsuki's recruitment, but he also showed a look of uneasiness and fear. Hungry Ghost Path, Chilabai's face sank and said coldly, "Uchiha Shinichi, you should know the consequences of disobeying me." The reason why Nagato was willing to forgive Shinichi is because of the betrayal of Orochimaru, Shino, and Shinichi, as well as the death of Hiriko. The Akatsuki organization suffered a serious loss of manpower, and the manpower available to him has become very scarce. Moreover, the rebellion of the Uchiha clan was suppressed by Amitsukami, and even the patriarch of the clan, Uchiha Fuyue, had his Manjikyu Sharingan dug out by Amitsukami. So Nagato felt that he could try to recruit the Uchiha clan, which has a grudge against Amitsukami. After all, both Uchiha Jishui and Uchiha Shinichi of the Uchiha clan have awakened their Manjikyu Sharingan and can play a big role in the fight against Amatsukami. Shinichi still ignored Nagato's ultimatum and hurriedly said to Yui behind him, "This Kumo's Jinchuriki has been made into the 6 paths of pain by Nagato. Not only does it have the strength of the Jinchuriki, but it also has the strange abilities of the 6 paths of pain. Even I may not be able to deal with it. Let's hurry up and leave." Mute looked at Yui suspiciously. She didn't expect that the Manjikyu of the Uchiha clan would come to protect Yui. This kind of treatment is not something that can be enjoyed by just Naruto's fiancée. Yui herself was also taken aback, but she immediately reacted, knowing that this must be the arrangement of Hyojin, so she no longer hesitated and immediately ordered everyone in the hospital to evacuate. Soon, the hospital became noisy, and everyone panicked and began to evacuate. Hungry Ghost Path, Chillabai didn't care about the people who fled in panic, but looked at Shinichi and asked lightly, "Why do you want to protect a Hyuga clansman? Is there something special about her?" Shinichi curled his lips and said, "You don't understand at all. I am protecting the shinobi world." He refused Jiraiya before because he wanted to stay in the village to protect Yui, because he is very clear that Hyojin seems to be indifferent, but if someone really touches something that Hyojin cares about, then the consequences will be unimaginable. He wasn't here just now because of the chaos in the village, so he temporarily went out to investigate. And when he found that the My Hospital was also attacked, he was scared out of his wits and hurriedly rushed over and activated Susanoo. Hungry Ghost Path, Chillabai frowned slightly. Protect the shinobi world? Shinichi no longer talked nonsense and directly urged his Susanoo to attack Hungry Ghost Path Chillabai. In his eyes, even a guy like Nagato can bring such a catastrophe to the shinobi world when he goes crazy. If something really happens to Yui and causes Hyojin to go crazy, then the shinobi world will be finished. Boom! The battle between Hungry Ghost Path Chillabai and Shinichi quickly destroyed most of the buildings in the My Hospital. In the face of Shinichi's Sukakama, Hungry Ghost Path Chillabai chose to completely liberate the tailed beast form and instantly turned into the huge body of an 8-tailed ox demon. But the circles of Rinnegan in his eye sockets show the fact that he is still under the control of Nagato. Shio, after completely transforming into a tailed beast form, Hungry Ghost Path Chillabai shot a huge tailed beast jade at Shinichi Susanoo without any scruples. Looking at the shining tailed beast jade attack, Shinichi's face turned cold and immediately launched his Manjikyu Sharingan's pupil technique, Heavenly Guard, without hesitation, temporarily locking his own state, and then urged to meet the opponent's tailed beast jade. He skillfully tilted the angle, and the tailed beast jade flew out diagonally. Rumble! Soon, the tailed beast jade that was bounced out of the village exploded in the woods outside the village, making a loud noise that shook the earth and mountains. With Hungry Ghost Path Chillabai completely transforming into a tailed beast form, Mortal Path Yugao, Naruto Path Laozi, Animal Path Yujito Mu, Azura Path Han also transformed into tailed beasts one after another. In an instant, 2 tails for tails, 5 tails, 6 tails, and 8 tails, these 5-tailed beasts with Rinnegan lines in their eye sockets raged in my village. In fact, for the Jinchuriki, the complete liberation of the tailed beast form is a very risky behavior. Only the perfect Jinchuriki that has reached an understanding with the tailed beast can do this. Otherwise, the Jinchuriki is likely to lose control of the tailed beast after the complete liberation and become a puppet of the tailed beast. Among the 5 Jinchuriki of the new 6 paths of pain, only the Nibi's Jinchuriki, Uni's Jinchuriki, and the 8 tails Jinchuriki, Chillabai's Jinchuriki, could do this. The other 3 wouldn't dare to do it. However, after being made into 6 paths of pain, these 5-tailed beasts were all suppressed by Nagato's Rinnegan and became chakra batteries for Nagato. Therefore, under the control of Nagato, the 6 paths of pain can tap the power of the Jinchuriki to the limit. These Jinchuriki that are completely liberated and have no scruples are not something that ordinary ninjas can resist. Except for Shinichi, all the other battlefields have been defeated, and some of the battlefields have even completely collapsed. Even Shinichi couldn't help but think in his heart, who would have thought that I, Uchiha Shinichi, would one day be the savior of the shinobi world? Who would have thought that I, Uchiha Shinichi, would one day save the shinobi world? The first chapter is here, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. Chapter 1086. In less than 10 minutes, nearly half of the village was reduced to ruins under the raging power of the five-tailed beasts. Outside the village, the Kage who were confronting Nagato listened to the continuous explosions and roars of the tailed beasts in the village, and all of them were shocked and angry, especially the three generations Naruto and Tsunade. Nagato said indifferently, "When the things they care about are destroyed, people will feel pain." Three generations Naruto was full of killing intent. "Nagato, you have completely fallen into the evil path." Tsunade shouted loudly, "Killing innocent people like this, is this what you call peace?" Although the vast majority of the villagers have been evacuated, there is still a small number of villagers staying in the village, and under the raging power of the tailed beasts, the deaths and injuries of the villagers are inevitable. Nagato shook his head. Only by deeply experiencing this pain, people will yearn for peace from the heart. This is the suffering that everyone must experience. Three generations Tsuchikage fell behind 3 generations Naruto, and 4 generations Lei Ying at this time, stretched out his palm and pressed on the back of the two while saying, "We can only fight." 3 generations Naruto and 4 generations Lei Ying nodded in unison. 3 generations Tsuchikage shouted, "Earth release, heavy and heavy rock technique." 3 generations Naruto and 4 generations Lei Ying, who were blessed by 3 generations Tsuchikage with the heavy and heavy rock technique, looked at each other, and then their figures flashed and attacked Nagato in the village. Asuma, who was wounded all over, and Chiriku supported each other and hid in a ruin. The Jonin and Umbu accompanying them were all scattered, and the entire team that stopped the Naruto Old Purple almost lost their combat effectiveness. Hyuga clan. Hayashi and Richa couldn't resist the mortal will Yugao even if they joined forces. Most of the Hyuga clan's land was flattened. Fortunately, mortal will Yugao didn't target the Hyuga clan, or rather, he didn't put the Hyuga clan in his eyes at all. After destroying the resistance of the Hyuga clan, he moved to other places. In the ruins of the clan grounds, Hayashi wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, his expression extremely ugly. "Damn it, I can't even deal with a single puppet." The other party's contempt for the Hyuga clan not only made Hayashi feel relieved, but also made him feel ashamed as the patriarch of the Hyuga clan. Near the inn, "Ziluo, you go cover me." After Druid shouted, he pounced on Yukini, who had transformed into a tailed beast. Among the elites of the various villages in the inn, only Cloud Village's Druid, as well as Sancrypsis' Shurchin technique to the extreme and Yugo's Berserk Ninja Yugo, can really cause damage to the tailed beast Yujito Ni. As for the others, including the granddaughter of the 3 generations Tsuchikage, Kuroto, they can only use ninjutsu on the periphery to provide support. Fortunately, there were Druid, Yugo, and Zoro, these 3 ninjas who could fight head-on, and they were barely able to resist the tailed beast Yujito Ni. In the ninja school, seeing that the situation was out of control, Guy, who was retreating in defeat, resolutely opened the 7th gate of the 8 inner gates. At the same time, Ningxi didn't care about destroying the ninja school and directly summoned the big wild boar. Under the joint efforts of Guy and big wild boar, the tailed beast Yujito Ni was quickly suppressed and firmly confined in the playground of the ninja school. Outside the village, Jishue's team of 5 people who were all seriously injured finally came back, and looking at the scene in front of them, the 5 people were shocked. The battle was almost everywhere in the village, and everywhere outside the village. The rising smoke covered the sky, and the flames of the explosions made the sky as red as blood. Sasuke murmured, This is war? Dadail, who was covered in bandages, said, It seems that Mai has fallen, yeah? Haku asked Jisue on the side, What else can we do? Jisue didn't respond to Haku, but prayed in his heart, Senpai, please come back quickly. On the other side, Itachi, who was still leading the My Ninja army to stop Konan from entering the village, was panting while looking back at the burning village. He was very anxious. Senpai, why haven't you come back yet? I can't bear the burden of Naruto. Inside the village. Before the duration of the Heavenly Guard ended, Shinichi launched a round of fierce attacks on the hungry ghost sect Chillabai, and then took the opportunity to remove the Susun and led Kuroto and the others to hide in the ruins. Mute asked, Are we just going to hide here? Sure. Shinichi quickly made a silent gesture, and then whispered, That guy is currently the strongest Jinchuriki in the shinobi world, and I just tried it. He seems to have been made into a hungry ghost sect by Nagato. All ninjutsu is ineffective against him. Kuroto lowered her voice. Even you can't deal with him? Shinichi smiled bitterly and said, Madam, the main reason why the Uchiha clan can suppress the tailed beast is because of Jinjutsu. That guy is now being controlled by Nagato's Rinnegan. So my jutsu Jinjutsu is ineffective against him. Plus you're nearby. I can't use it at all. Boss. Mute was stunned for a moment, wondering why Shinichi called Kuroto boss. Don't worry about it. Waving his hand, Shinichi glanced at Sakura, Ino, and the injured Shien and Gale, and thought to himself, With so many people, it's impossible to escape. It seems that I can only abandon some people. Kuroto looked at the hungry ghost sect Chillabai who was wreaking havoc outside, and said with a worried face, The opponent is so powerful. Then the mirror, Shinichi smiled. Don't worry, as long as the boss comes back, the problem will be solved. Swish, at this time, a figure landed on the 5th generation Naruto Hyojin's Naruto Rock. Without a doubt, this figure was not a bystander, but Hyojin who had just returned for the country of water. Because Kakashi's chakra was limited, he could not use the Flying Thunder God technique to directly bring him back to Mai, so he could only bring him from the country of water to the country of fire. Taking advantage of Kakashi's recovery time, Suijin directly left Kakashi behind, and then switched back to his release form on the way back to Konoha at full speed, and finally rushed back to the village. You have made the captured Jinchuriki into the 6 paths of pain. Humph, what a great idea. Nagato, is this where your confidence comes from? With Hyojin's current state, if he wanted to defeat Nagato, who had 5-tailed beasts and the outer path demon statue, he would probably have to use up all the chakra stored in the Ein seal on his forehead over the years, as well as the chakra that had been emptied of the giant Tenseigan. But once these chakra were used up, his bloodline net plan would have to be delayed for 2 to 3 years, and this was obviously a price he was not willing to pay. Even so, he was not completely helpless against Nagato, so he slowly raised his hands and began to form a seal. Here's the second update, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. Also, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1087. The strong wind blew the robe on Suijin's body, and in the midst of the smoke, he stood on the Hokage rock and slowly raised his arms. The chakra in his body also surged. The current Nagato is infinitely close to the 6-path level, and except for the fact that he hasn't mastered Senjutsu like Hyojin, he doesn't have any shortcomings. In the face of such a strong Nagato, no matter how many ninjas there are, even a Kage level can barely pose a threat to him. So even Hyojin doesn't dare to say that he can win. Because he knows this, Hyojin is not unprepared for the current situation. It's you. While making hand seals, Hyojin's eyes swept around the village, and finally fell on Tendo, who was fighting with Jiraiya, and the corner of his mouth rose. Immediately after completing the hand seals, he immediately used the Tenseigan's soul descent technique. His spirit body instantly left his Ein body, and like a stream of light, he shot towards the distant heavenly path. Far away, Shinra Tensei. Accompanied by the cold rebuke of the will of the heavens, Jiraiya, who was in the immortal mode, was once again sent flying and fell heavily into a collapsed house. Tendo walked toward Jiraiya and said, "Jiraiya, Sensei, did you feel it? This is the power that I can bring peace to the shinobi world." In the ruins, Fukasaku, who was on Jiraiya's shoulder, coughed for a while and said, "Little Jiraiya, his pupil power is much stronger than the last time we fought. What's going on?" Jiraiya said, "I don't know. Maybe he got the power of the 5 Jinchuriki captured by the Akatsuki organization." Shima-sensei said helplessly, "Let's try Jinjutsu." Different from Uchiha's pupil technique Jinjutsu, Shima and Fukasaku can join hands to cast a sound Jinjutsu that contains the energy of nature, toad singing. Hearing Shima Immortal's suggestion, Fukasaku, Immortal, shook his head. Tiandao's Shinra Tensei had almost razed the surroundings to the ground, causing the surrounding terrain to be too open. The effect of the toads singing would be greatly reduced. Along the way, heavens will continue to speak. Hand over the 9 tails human Jinchuriki and 7 tails human Jinchuriki. Jiraiya, who was in a daze from the fall, struggled to stand up. He looked around at the messy surroundings and said sadly, "All of this was caused by me. I really regret it." Will of the Heavens didn't stop and asked coldly, "Are you regretting not killing us back then?" Jiraiya shook his head and said, "I regret leaving you back then." Tiandao was stunned for a moment, and his footsteps slowed down slightly. Then he took another step forward. "Teacher Jiraiya, regret can't change anything. Accept your fate." After Jiraiya sighed dejectedly, he once again roused his whole body's chakra. Facing Nagato, anyone could retreat, but he, the teacher who taught Nagato ninjutsu, couldn't. Even if he died here, he wouldn't hesitate. Soon, Will of the Heavens stopped and raised his right arm to point at Jiraiya. "Since you're not willing to hand over the 9 tails human Jinchuriki and 7 tails human Jinchuriki, then die." Jiraiya's face immediately darkened, and he prepared himself to bear the impact of Shinra Tensei. However, the expected Shinra Tensei did not appear. Not only that, Will of the Heavens slowly lowered his arm, and the 2 Rinnegan in his eye sockets began to move chaotically, as if he had lost his mind. Shima Immortal asked in confusion, "What's wrong with him?" Both Jiraiya and Fukasaku Immortal shook their heads, and their faces were filled with confusion. There was no doubt that just now, Hyojin, who had cast the Soul Descend technique, forcefully threw his spirit into Tiandao's body and fought with Nagato for control of Tiandao. That was why such an abnormal scene had occurred. Outside of my village, Nagato, who was about to cast Shinra Tensei to repel 4 generations Laying, suddenly had a cold look in his eyes. His body swayed, and he chose to dodge 4 generations Lei Ying's attack. Boom! Under the double amplification of Thunder Release Chakra Mode and Rock Weight Technique, 4 generations Lei Ying, who was as fast as lightning, smashed into the place where Nagato had been, creating a large pit with a diameter of more than 10 meters. 3 generations Naruto cast the ninjutsu just in time. Earth Release, Yellow Springs Swamp. Nagato, who had just dodged 4 generations Lei Ying's attack, suddenly felt the ground under his feet turn into a muddy swamp, entangling his legs firmly in the swamp. At the same time, 4 generations Kazakage's golden sand gathered from all directions, tightly wrapping around Nagato's body. 3 generations Tsuchikage, who was flying in the air, aimed at Nagato without hesitation and pushed with both hands. Dust Release, Original World Stripping Technique. Swoosh, a shining beam of light instantly attacked Nagato on the ground. The joint attack of the 4 Kage was almost completed in an instant. From Nagato dodging to being trapped in the swamp, the whole process only took 1 or 2 breaths. However, in the face of such a clever attack, Nagato's face did not have the slightest panic and directly reached out to meet the incoming beam of light. In an instant, the dust release of 3 generations Tsuchikage was directly absorbed by Nagato in front of everyone. Tsunade's face sank when she saw this, Even the dust release that was eliminated as a blood inheritance can't do anything to him. 4 generations laying cursed. Damn it, this damn guy. 3 generations. Naruto shook his head. I can only try the sealing technique. Shinra Tensei. After shaking off all the shackles, Nagato did not pay attention to the Kage near him, but looked at the direction of the heavens while in the distance, and said to himself, "Who are you?" The Kage looked at each other and did not understand what was going on. Nagato then said, "Ant, you are offending God." After that, Nagato used the black stick to put more of the pupil power of the Rinnegan into the body of the Heaven's will, and Hyojin entered the body of the Heaven to compete for the control of the Heaven's will. Hyojin, who entered the Heaven's will, smiled slightly, did not respond to Nagato's question, nor did he reveal his identity, but unreservedly released the pupil power of the Tenseigan. In an instant, the 2 powerful pupil powers fought in the body of the Heaven's will, and because Hyojin's spirit body descended, he had a certain advantage, so after a battle, he temporarily gained control of the Heaven's will. So, Jiraiya was surprised to find that the Heaven's will in front of him with a distorted expression slowly raised his arms and put his hands together. Boom! In an instant, a strange and incomparably huge chakra, as if it had some inexplicable resonance, fell from the sky from a very far distance, and fell on the body of the Heaven. On the moon, Otsutsuki Samurai, who was sitting quietly in front of the giant Tenseigan, suddenly opened his eyes. The first update is here, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. Chapter 1088. After failing to track down the giant Tenseigan last time, Otsutsuki Samurai did not continue to wander in the shinobi world, but quietly returned to the moon. First, because the giant Tenseigan of the Hyuga clan has not reacted except for the first time when it was activated by Hyuga Aoki and had an instinctive resonance with it. Secondly, after fighting with Hyojin, who controlled the Earth Release clone, Kuroto found that there are many hidden ninjas in the shinobi world that can threaten him, and at the same time, he also discovered many shortcomings of his own. Based on these 2 points, Kuroto, who returned to the moon, silently paid attention to the shinobi world while working harder to improve himself. As the direct bloodline of Otsutsuki Himura left on the moon, Otsutsuki Samurai can be said to be the closest person to the Otsutsuki clan in the shinobi world today. This can be seen from the attitude of Otsutsuki Samurai towards Otsutsuki Samurai when Otsutsuki Himura crossed the void from the original space-time. Therefore, with the advantage of his own bloodline and the rich inheritance on the moon, Otsutsuki Samurai's strength has improved very rapidly during this period, and with the growth of age, he is 2 or 3 years older than Naruto and Hinata. His physical development is almost complete, and the growth of his pupil power has also entered a period of rapid explosive growth. In addition to honing himself, Otsutsuki Samurai has also been constantly resonating with the giant Tenseigan on the moon during this period to improve the compatibility between himself and the giant Tenseigan. And because Kuroto himself is the first authority holder of this giant Tenseigan, the countless Byakugan that make up this giant Tenseigan are all his blood relatives without exception, so the soul resonance went very smoothly, and the compatibility between him and the giant Tenseigan is also increasing day by day. Because of this, Kuroto, who is resonating with the giant Tenseigan on the moon, immediately noticed the abnormal movement of the giant Tenseigan of the Hyuga clan in the shinobi world. Almost at the moment of opening his eyes, Kuroto put his pupil power into the giant Tenseigan in front of him, and with the inside of the giant Tenseigan, he directly crossed the barrier between the earth and the moon, and accurately locked his eyes on the My Village. The giant Tenseigan of the Hyuga clan is actually in his hands. Without a careful search, Otsutsuki Samurai's eyes fell on Tendo that exudes a huge amount of Tenseigan chakra, and noticed the Rinnegan lines in Tendo's eye sockets. "You shameless thief! How dare you touch the Tenseigan?" In the blink of an eye, Otsutsuki Samurai's expression became incomparably gloomy, and murderous intent surged from his body. He knew very well that only the eye of reincarnation could steal the outer Tao demon statue sealed in the moon. Therefore, the heavenly Tao in my village with the eye of reincarnation was most likely the thief. He had yet to settle the score with the heretic Tao demon statue. This is absolutely intolerable for Otsutsuki Tonari, because in his opinion, even the Hyuga clan, as a relative of the Hyuga clan, doesn't have the qualifications to control the giant Tenseigan, let alone an outsider. Soon, Otsutsuki Samurai's eyes narrowed, and he suppressed the anger in his heart. But with calm thinking, the killing intent on his body not only did not weaken in the slightest, but also became stronger. He already has the outer Tao demon statue. If I let him completely master the giant Tenseigan, then, if things develop in this direction, Otsutsuki Samurai feels that not only will his ancestors' last wish to reshape the shinobi world be unable to be completed, even the pure land of the moon will probably be threatened by the other party in the future. At this thought, Otsutsuki Samurai no longer hesitated and completely made up his mind in my village. Hyojin, who temporarily seized the body of Tendo, activated the resonance with the giant Tenseigan in the air fortress, and after chakra transmission, a message was transmitted into Nagato's mind. This message was none other than the exact location of Hyojin's air fortress. Because at the time of the resonance, Nagato's will also exist in the body of Tendo, so Nagato also sensed the giant Tenseigan far above the sea through the resonance and chakra transmission. What's that? For a moment, Nagato subconsciously looked in the direction of the sea. In the air fortress, after noticing the movement of the giant Tenseigan, Xianglin and Gaara rushed to the power room together. After looking at each other, Xianglin said, Sama said that once he sends a long-range signal, we have to act according to the previous plan. Gaara nodded and said, I'll be responsible for the movement of the fortress. The outside matters will be left to you. Okay. After responding, Xianglin and the 3 generations Kazekage puppets immediately left the air fortress. Not long after, Gaara controlled the air fortress in the power room to dive into the clouds according to the original plan and began the emergency transfer, while Xianglin and the 3 generations Kazekage puppets came to the outside of the air fortress according to Hyojin's instructions, using 10,000 Mammoth Tenseigan and Magnet Release to clean up all the birds encountered along the way, to ensure that no creature will reveal the location of the air fortress. Because whether it is Nagato or Otsutsuki Samurai, they both have the ability to read the memories of living beings. If their luck is bad enough, an inconspicuous bird can expose the location of the air fortress. On Hyojin's side, with the help of the huge amount of Tenseigan chakra transmitted by the giant Tenseigan, he quickly and completely suppressed Nagato's control of Tendo. Then, with the help of the black stick inlaid on the other paths and using Nagato's own chakra transmission system, he launched the precise rain pull, instantly sucking the tailed, beast-transformed, hungry ghost path Chilabai, animal path Yujito, human path Yugao, Naruto path Laozi, and Azura path Han to the front of Tendo. Rumble, accompanied by huge smoke and deafening roars, Jiraiya and the 2-toed masters were stunned as they looked at the 5-tailed beast-transformed human Jinchuriki scattered in the village, as if they were being dragged by an invisible force, like livestock being dragged all the way. What? What happened? Are they having internal strife? The 2-toed masters looked at each other. Jiraiya was even more sluggish. He did not expect such a sudden change at all. After dragging the 5 human Jinchuriki over, Hyojin used the body of Tendo, and once again used the black stick, the internal transmission system of 6 paths of pain, and shouted, 4 symbols seal. In an instant, a series of black sealing techniques flowed out of Suijin's palms, as if they had a mind of their own, and through the black stick, they were transmitted to the 5-tailed beast Jinchuriki around him. Bang, bang, bang. As the sealing technique took effect, in bursts of white smoke, the 5 fully liberated human Jinchuriki returned to their human form. Chapter 1089. What happened? The ninjas who were fighting with the 6 paths of pain scattered all over the village had this question in their hearts. Near the inn, after the Cloud Village's druid stopped using the thunder escape stimulation technique, he gasped for breath while staring blankly at the deep gully left on the ground when the animal Dao Uni, who had completely transformed into a tailed beast, was dragged away. Hope landed beside Druid and said, "The tailed beast transformation of Yujito Ni seems to have been forcibly sealed by someone. I can't sense second last chakra anymore." Sammy, the blonde beauty of the Cloud Village, also rushed to Druid's side and asked, "What should we do now?" Along the obvious gully on the ground, Druid looked in the direction where Yujito Ni was dragged away and said, "This may be an opportunity. We can try to rescue Yujito Ni." At this time, the Sancrypsis, Rock Village, and Yugo of the Sound Ninjas also gathered. Because of the previous cooperation, everyone has a tacit understanding with each other. So, when Daruji made a request, the ninjas of the villages agreed without much hesitation, and together with the Cloud Ninjas, they chased in the direction where Yujito Ni was being dragged. Near the My Hospital, the corner of Shinichi's mouth trembled when he saw Chillabai, who had completely transformed into a tailed beast, being dragged away without any resistance. Mew was puzzled. What happened? Kuroto, who had the Byakugan activated, said, "I don't know. It seems that a very strong chakra suddenly appeared and dragged him away with the black stick." You hit a little bit, because she could feel that the sudden appearance of the chakra was very familiar. "Don't worry, we are fine now." Shinichi heaved a sigh of relief, because he knows very well that the only person in the current shinobi world who can deal with the 6 paths of pain so easily is Kuroto. Inside the ninja school, after the Shura Dao man who had completely transformed into a tailed beast was dragged away, Guy, who was drenched in sweat, fell to the ground and panted heavily. His chest heaved up and down violently like a bellows. Ningxi jumped down from the wild boar and asked, "Teacher Akai, are you all right?" Guy shook his head. "Don't worry about me. Go and confirm what happened." Ningxi, who had activated the whites of his eyes, listened while observing Guy. He saw that Guy had multiple fractures on his body, and his muscles were torn and pulled. Although they weren't fatal, it was enough to make one tremble in fear. Is this the side effect of the 8 inner hidden gates? Shocked, Ningxi had an epiphany. Although Guy had completely suppressed the Azura with the help of the big wild boar and beat up the 5-tailed Jinchuriki to the point that he couldn't even retaliate, such a burst of power was obviously not without a price. Hashiman Tanku can indeed allow an ordinary ninja to possess a destructive power that can threaten a 6-path shinobi, but this threat only exists in theory. In the original time and space, Guy was able to kick Guy to a large extent because Madara wanted to test the power of Guy after opening the 8th Death Gate. Even so, without the assistance of 4 generations Naruto using the Flying Thunder God technique to remove Madara's Truth-Seeking Ball, and Kakashi using Kimui to break Madara's Truth-Seeking Ball, Guy wouldn't have been able to complete that kick. And even with so many assistants, if Madara wanted to dodge, it's not impossible. Not to mention Madara's Rinnegan Eye technique, Lewin Tomb Edge Prison. Madara's own speed will not be much slower than Guy who opened the Death Gate. As long as Madara does not want to fight, there are ways to delay time. Kai-sensei, you can rest assured. Leave the rest to me. Ningxi nodded, then jumped on the head of the big wild boar and rushed in the direction where Azura was dragged away. Almost at the same time, several other ninjas who were fighting with 6 paths of pain also rushed in the direction where 6 paths of pain was forcibly dragged away. On Hyojin's side, under the surprised eyes of Jiraiya and the 2 toads, Hyojin instantly completed the seal of the 5 Jinchuriki, Yujito Ni, Yutaka, Old Purple, and Han. Hyojin directly threw them who were imprisoned by the 4-symbol seal in the same place, and then quickly flew out of the village. Although the sealing effect of the 4-symbol seal on targets with chakra volume is limited and can't be maintained for too long, but Suijin believes that Jiraiya, as well as the other Konoha ninjas, will be able to properly deal with the 5 Jinchuriki sealed by him. And now he must leave the village as soon as possible and move the battlefield to an area far away from the village, because he can faintly feel that something is above his head, approaching quickly. On the other side of the village, sensing that the demon path, human path, Azura path, hell path, and animal path of the 6 paths of pain were sealed almost at the same time, and the Tendo controlled by the mysterious person was flying out of Konoha village. Nagato finally changed the indifference on his face, and his expression suddenly became gloomy. Humph! After a light snort, Nagato completely ignored the few Kage in front of him and directly stomped on the ground with both legs. With a bang, he flew out like a cannonball and chased after the Tendo, looking at the ground in front of them that shattered dozens of meters because of Nagato's stomp. The few Kage looked at each other and were speechless. Not long after, Nagato intercepted the Tendo controlled by Hyojin in a forest dozens of miles away from my village and asked coldly, "Who are you?" Because he had stopped resonating with the giant Tenseigan and lost the support of the giant Tenseigan's chakra. Plus Nagato was in front of him. Hyojin's control of the Tendo was very weak at this time, and he could only barely control the Tendo, and said, "Ma, you will know who I am soon." As soon as he finished speaking, a rumbling sound came from the sky. Nagato looked up, and his pupils constricted. This was because the rumbling sound that cut through the clouds was none other than a meteorite wrapped in the Tenseigan's chakra and falling rapidly. Ha! Just as Nagato was observing the meteorite, the Tendo in front of him suddenly lost control and fell to the ground weakly. Nagato, who came back to his senses, was stunned. "Otsutsuki Samurai, it really is you." Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, the falling meteorite stirred up a mushroom-shaped cloud, and huge flames and shockwaves spread out in all directions. Even my village, which was dozens of miles away, felt the earth shaking. On Naruto Rock, Hyojin spat out a mouthful of blood. Damn it, I almost didn't run away. I'm asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. I wish everyone a happy Lantern Festival. Chapter 1090. Forcibly invading the body of Tendo with a fragile spirit body is actually a very risky behavior. That's why Hyojin caught Nagato off guard. If he does this again, he will definitely die. Even so, he doesn't feel good. In the final analysis, 6 Paths of Pain is just a puppet of Nagato's Rinnegan. Kuroto used the power of the Tenseigan, carried by his own spirit body, to fight against the power of Nagato's Rinnegan. Not to mention the outcome of the battle. Just the price paid is enough to show that the two sides are not on the same level. In the battle, Nagato only consumed the power of the reincarnation eyes, but Hyojin not only consumed the power of his Tenseigan, but his spirit body was also damaged. This is why he suddenly vomited blood after returning to the in-release body. The damage to the spirit body, even if it's only a little, takes a long time to gradually recover. And this time, if it wasn't for the support of the Tenseigan soul descent technique, he may not have been able to successfully withdraw from Tendo. Because when Nagato intercepted him, he had already used the power of the eyes of Samsara to try to imprison his spirit body in the heavenly Tao. He almost got away with it. Wiping the corners of his mouth, Hyojin slowly stood up. Although the operation just now was a bit risky, it did have a miraculous effect as he expected. Not only did he successfully attract the attention of Otsutsuki Samurai on the moon, but also through the black stick transmission system inside 6 Paths of Pain, he easily solved the 5 Jinchuriki that Nagato made into 6 Paths of Pain. Otherwise, even if it was him, it would not be easy to deal with 5 Jinchuriki controlled by Nagato's Rinnegan eyes. And this tactic is not something he thought of on the spot. In order to deal with the Akatsuki's attack, Kuroto made a lot of plans, one of which was to deal with the 6 Paths of Pain. Thanks to his Rinnegan, he can study the black rod produced by the Rinnegan's yin-yang release. So he was able to come up with a set of tactics that, although the risk is huge, the reward is equally huge. It can be said that in the current shinobi world, only he who has mastered the soul descending technique and is extremely familiar with the black rod can accomplish this. Hoo-hoo! At this moment, The huge shockwave produced by the falling meteor swept through the entire village, plunging the village into darkness. In the darkness, on Naruto Rock, Hyojin's expression darkened. He did not expect Nagato to catch up so quickly, nor did he expect that Otsutsuki Sarai on the moon would act so hastily, so he did not move their battlefield far enough. "I hope they don't come here," muttering to himself. Hyojin's figure flashed and rushed toward the distant battlefield. The meteor fell to the ground. As a mushroom-shaped smoke and dust rose high into the sky, it continued to spread in all directions.